Okay, so
Yeah. Tell Pam and
Present.
everybody what's going on.
here,
Yeah.
here, but mentally not here.
Start without everybody.
There's Mark.
Mark has a white face.
Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, everyone.
Mark.
Oh, you were ghosting for a minute there, Mark.
Uh-oh. I'll sit closer.
Oh, we're hoping well.
All right, we're going to start the Plan Commission meeting at the Town of Lisbon Town Hall on Thursday, December 10th, 2020 at 6:31 p.m.
Brian Olhaven,
Here.
Chad Samansky,
Here.
Ed Nelson,
Here.
James Stadler is absent and excused, Joe Osterman,
Here.
Mark Meyer,
Here.
Michael Van Clunen,
Here.
Mitch Lacease,
No, Mitch.
he's on
Oh,
Zoom.
it's-
I'm here, I'm sorry.
There he is.
Planner Rachel Holloway is on Zoom, and Rebecca Plotecker.
Here.
And we also have Administrator Kathy Nicholas and Clerk Elise Capazzo, and I don't believe I missed. Oh, we've got Supervisor Linda Beal here as well for the public hearings.
So constitute a quorum of the board and Plan Commission. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, item 3 is citizens' comments. Does anyone have anything to say about anything on the agenda? We have one person. Is that Lisa?
I would.
Yes.
Do you have any citizens' comments?
Yes, I do have comments whenever, unless someone else started talking. I'm
No,
not
would
sure.
you like to make comments about the public hearings, or is this about another agenda item?
It is about agenda items.
Okay, we have a couple
Same here.
public hearings tonight. One is for the major grading and conditional use for Tom Hour, which is the
Yep.
shooter's property. And then we have another one on the chapter 11. Does it have to do with either one of those?
Yes, both of those.
Okay, we'll be having the public hearings right after citizens' comments.
Oh, you are?
Yep, and you can
Well-
speak during those if you want to of those.
Okay.
Okay,
What's the purpose of this citizens comment part of
well,
it?
we usually have it after this, honestly. We just got to move it around a little bit. We've been tweaking the agenda a little bit.
Okay, so what
You can-
should we be commenting on in this section?
You can make it now or you can make it under the public hearing. It's either way.
Okay. I can wait for the public hearing if that's the protocol.
Sure, we're just gonna do the minutes approval then, and then we'll be to the public hearing. Which one, did you want to speak to both of them or just one?
Both of them. Yep,
Okay.
definitely.
All
Thank
right.
you.
All right, we'll go to item 4 then, which is discussion,
This
approval of the minutes. The minutes are gonna be tweaked a little bit and ready for the next plan commission meeting, so we're just gonna move past those tonight.
Okay.
Leading to the public hearing.
is no.
Public hearing number 1 is request by applicant Tom Hour for a major grading conditional use permit for the property located at West 220 North 6437 Town Line Road, tax key LSBT 0240.992.002. All right, so this would be the time. Lisa?
Yes. Tonight, when I looked at the agenda, is the first time I've seen this request for a change in zoning. I live on Town Line Road, close to County Q. So I'm just wondering what's happening, what's going on that property. Is that the old curative property? Is that, I looked it up, I think that's what it is.
So the public hearing, this one tonight is about the old Shooters property, which is on Town Line Road by the railroad tracks.
By the railroad tracks. Okay. Still curious about what it is, this is the first time I've seen mention of it. And I do live on the road, so definitely have an interest in what's going on.
Okay. I don't know if the applicant's here. I don't know if you want to just give a little overview.
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me switch the screen.
Where am I looking?
No, you're good.
You're good. You
Oh,
can
just
talk.
do anything.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, my name is Tom and I'm the applicant. We're going to be developing a small retail nursery, plant sales, landscape design and construction, pretty minor operation on that 3.5 acres.
Okay, great. That sounds really good. What's the name of the landscape company that'll be
The
there?
Ground Crafter.
I'm sorry?
It's called The Ground Crafter.
The Ground Crafter. Okay.
And you can look us up online. It's thegroundcrafter.com.
Great. Well, I'm a member of Wild Ones, actually president of a chapter. Don't know if you're familiar with us, but we support native plants and native landscaping. So to hear that the development is for a nursery is kind of exciting.
Right up your alley. Yeah, we're
It
looking
is.
to,
It is.
we want to have some club meetings and stuff there. So we're really interested in getting the gardening, and construction community involved. So
Okay. And what kind of disruption to the landscape are you looking at?
we're going to be
I saw a grading project. That seems to be the main thing right now.
right. We're actually not doing a whole lot of grading. It's really just a method to sort of level out a few areas on the property so we can have room for plant display tables and such. There's an existing hill or berm, if you will, around the barn itself, the old Pierce barn, that was used, from my understanding, to get hay and stuff up into the loft.
Yep.
We're going to be taking that down so we can get down to grade, so we can, use that area on the outside of the barn for planting and display. So we're really pushing that soil into a lower spot in the back northwest corner, so it's usable space.
Okay. Versus filling in for a wetland area, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Nope. Yeah, we're
Because I
just,
know in that area, there are a lot of really good native plant colonies that maybe, have been there for quite some time.
there's some stuff in the environmental corridor. That's Willow Creek that runs right by through north side of the property. So yeah, no disturbance in there.
Great, great. And, I don't know when the project is starting, but, our organization would be interested potentially in doing plant rescue if if you're disrupting areas where there are native plants.
There's a lot of broken concrete and weeds. If you want them, you can have them.
Is it? Well, we have plenty of weeds everywhere. No, we do not want those, but I just want you to be aware that there are some, valuable native plant colonies back there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the overview. Appreciate it.
Sure.
All right. Does anyone else have any other comments on this public hearing? No other comments? All right. I will then close the public hearing for Tom Auer. Move into the next public hearing. It's public hearing number 2, a joint public hearing to consider proposed amendments to various sections of Chapter 11 of the Town of Lisbon zoning code related to conditional use permits due to a recent change in state law. All right. Does anyone have any comments on this one? Lisa, you had some questions on this one?
Yeah, just wondering what the change in the state law is.
Okay, so normally in the public hearings, we will write down, I let you go back and forth with Tom. It's a little different with Zoom, obviously, but we're going to go over all of this when we get to the agenda item. So normally we would.
Will we have a chance to comment at that time then, or ask questions?
If you don't. But
That's what the problem is.
Yeah, and that's the, unfortunately,
I
that's.
actually have some comments.
So it's the public hearing, and then when it gets to the board level, it's just between the board at that time.
Okay.
If you have any questions, though, you can contact us after the meeting. You can call me, Kathy, the administrator, any of us, and we can answer any questions you might have.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, because it makes it kind of difficult to weigh in on something when you haven't heard the discussion on it.
I don't disagree with you. We do have the packets online, which has all the information on it.
Yep.
Chance to look at that.
Just a little while before the meeting, and I work full time in November, December are crazy months, so I depend on our town board and commissions to be monitoring things. Unfortunately I can't do it on a part-time to full-time basis.
Completely understand.
Yep.
So
That's why we have you guys, right?
there you go.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
For sure. Thank you. Can you turn that camera back?
Hello?
Oh, it's fine. All right.
Hello?
Hi.
Noel is trying to speak.
Oh, Noel. How you doing? This Noel or Sarah?
Yeah, I'm trying to speak. I don't know if you can hear me or not.
We can hear you.
This is Noel. Okay, good. I did have a couple comments on the CUPs or the cups, the legislation that you guys are going to be looking to work into your own town plan. Some of the suggestions that I was looking over from, what is this company, Verbecker? I noticed that basically the overall is
You still there? Noel? Noel? We can't hear you.
Mhm.
Well, she comes back on, we'll let her
Well.
speak to her points. Oh, she's gone. All right, does anyone else have any comments on the public hearing number 2 on the conditional use, chapter 11 for the conditional use? No? All right, I'm gonna close the public hearing, but if Noel comes back on, we'll give her a chance to finish her comments. All right, we'll then move to item 6, which is new business. A, Tom Aller, the Ground Crafter LLC for approval of a major grading conditional use permit for the property located at the West 220 North 6437 Town Line Road, tax key LSBT 0240.992.002. Start off with you, Rachel.
All right, good evening. We have tonight, the way I presented these slides, I'll focus first on this major grading piece just because that's the agenda item. But the staff report, as you all might have seen in the slides you'll see are kind of combined with his site plan, just because it's all kind of a connected item here. But Mr. Auer, for his project, you saw this back in November. He presented his site plan and proposed operation. This is on Town Line Road, just north of County F. So you're familiar with this site. It's really just this southernmost site, the parcel here, which would be separated from what's currently one tax key. So he's proposing to locate a business here, do some improvements to the site. As Tom was describing earlier, it would involve a little bit of earthwork. He's looking to do some improvements really to a parking area, expand parking for locating his business here, upgrade some of the existing buildings and add some other accessory buildings that would all facilitate his retail nursery operation. So we just got some pictures here, some maps of the existing site, as we usually include here in the slides and in the packets. We'll revisit some of this later. That I'll skip to the stuff that's relevant to the grading permit. It does need a major grading permit because by town ordinances, if you disturb more than 6,000 square feet or 60 cubic yards of dirt, then you need to get a major grading permit, which triggers a public hearing and needs to be processed as a conditional use permit or CUP. That's why this item is on the agenda before you tonight. The staff report, and I apologize, the staff report's in a different order than the agenda items. I just didn't realize that, but the major grading piece of that, the town engineer, Mitch Lysis, reviewed this per the grading, the standards in the zoning code for grading permits, and did offer comments. So those have been folded into the planner memo, just to kind of streamline that. And there are a couple ways that the town has to review this, and really it's there's standard criteria for any conditional use permit. The general rule there is that if these are identified on the slide, but if the plan commission determines that the proposed earthwork associated with his project would not do any of these things, these are 5 criteria outlined in your zoning code, then you should approve the conditional use permit. And in the staff report, we review these. So the questions are, would it materially endanger public health, general welfare, or safety? In our view, it would not. Would it be hazardous, harmful, noxious, offensive, or be a nuisance for various reasons? We don't think it would. It seems like very typical type of project for this type of site improvement. Would it have an adverse effect on other property values? Don't believe that it would. Would it be inharmonious with the area that it's located in? We don't believe so. It's really just a temporary condition to enable his project to go forward. And would it be in general conformity with the land use plan, your comprehensive plan, the transportation, et cetera, the other plans that the town has on file, This is all we discussed in November, but the overall project is in line with what the town's long-range plans are and your zoning. So we believe that this major grading component of the project would also be in harmony with those things. In addition to that general criteria for any conditional use permit, we also had to review against specific criteria in the code for major grading permits and earthwork of this scale. That was also addressed in the staff memo, and staff is recommending approval of the major grading permit with certain conditions, and these are provided by the town engineer. So you can see these on the slide and also in the staff report. We're recommending conditions that, we would be following the applicable erosion control and stormwater regulations. It would be involving silt fencing. Mitch kindly provided some links here to DNR guidance and standards that should be followed as part of the project. And those are kind of covers the first three recommended conditions. Of course, obtaining all necessary other permits that would be needed, whether it's town or county or state. Erosion control measures, we've got contact information for Mitch. The applicant's been in contact with Mitch and working with him already. So this is just a matter of ongoing, in the course of his project, continue to work with the town engineer. The materials, the application provided outlines what the changes are proposed to the site so that the conditional use would be approved, based on the plans that were submitted. It's kind of a standard language here. And then the owner should keep a copy of the conditional use on file, and it lasts for 1 year. If the project has not commenced in a year, the town can have that permit be expired. Those are all of the staff comments on the major grading piece of it from my end, unless Mitch has anything to add.
No, not really at this time. I mean, Rachel summarized this pretty well. The one thing I would just reinforce a little bit is just making sure that we get all of the local permits from the county in place before any of the work is completed. I know that they're currently reviewing Tom's latest submittal to them. So if that gets approved, I'd like to have a copy of that on hand at the town.
Okay. Comments from the board? Brian?
No, I'm good.
I have nothing. Ed?
Nothing. We're just talking about Part A. Correct?
Yep.
No comment.
No, I
Mark?
don't have anything.
Good with the grading.
All right. Can you go back to the first slide? Rachel? Yep. Tom, can you step up? Sure. Okay. I think that's, the next one that talks about the, like materially endangering the public health, general welfare and safety.
Oh, yeah.
So part of the new conditional use laws is I need you to state for the record that you're not going to materially endanger the public health, general welfare, and safety by doing this. You're not going to be hazardous, harmful, noxious, offensive, or a nuisance by reason of noise, dust, smoke, odor, or other similar factor, and for any other reason cause a substantially adverse effect on property values. You're going to be harmonious with the area in which it is to be located. You will not be in general, and you will not be in general conformity with, you will be in general conformity with the land use plan, comprehensive plan, transportation plan, environmental plan, park and recreation plan, any other officially adopted plan. I just need you to state for the record that you believe and you will follow those.
I will, and I do believe in that.
All right. Does anyone on the board have any evidence against this conditional use? Potential?
No.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments on this item? Does anyone want to make a motion on this item?
I will, Mr. Chairman. Get us off to a start this evening. I will, I would move that the request by applicant Tom Auer for a major grading CUP for the property located at West 220 North 6437 Town Line Road with a tax code of 0240.992.002 be approved as proposed with attention to planner reports, planner comments of November 4th, 2020.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Chad?
Sorry, can I just clarify that the report should be dated December?
Second.
Whoops. Sorry, Rachel.
All right.
Need a motion on that?
Yes,
Second, okay with that.
to change the date to December 2nd, 2020.
Second is okay with that.
All right. Everything's covered in the motion?
Mitch's comments as well, of having the permit to the town hall for the record from the county. That was one of Mitch's comments.
Want to include that in your motion, Ed?
Yes.
Second?
Yes.
Okay. All right, anything else? Any other comments? Everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 6-0. All right, move on to item B, for Tom Owen and the Ground Crafter LLC for approval of a site plan and plan of operation for the property located at West 220 North 6427 Town Line Road, LSP 20240.992.002. All right, we'll start out with you again, Rachel.
All right. Since you had a good discussion in the November meeting, I don't want to spend unnecessary time on this, but I'll point out the things that were modified from November, just so it's clear what has changed in the proposal to kind of help your discussion on this. So yes, it would be a landscape retail greenhouse nursery. It includes a landscape contracting business. You provide services. That also includes snowplow operation. This would be off-site. You recently got rezoning to B3 approved by the town. I would note that is still pending at the county. I'm not clear on their exact timeline there. Last I heard, it might be January for final county board approval, unless Tom has an update on that. That's the best information I have.
I do not.
Okay. So this was reviewed under the standards for your B3 zoning district. So just to note that we don't anticipate any issues there at the moment. It's about a 3.2 acre site. And the differences from last month, so we've got more clarity on the specific land uses. These would all be permitted uses in the B3 zoning district. We covered the major grading component of it, which is a conditional use. We just covered that. I don't know if the slides say this one, but the memo does that there is a component for, excuse me, I'm just looking for it in the memo here. So the uses allowed by B3 are fairly broad, so it allows a wide range of business uses. And I felt like his operation fits within that. It includes language that says any similar use subject to approval of the plan commission can be approved as permitted in B3. So other types of uses allowed are, car sales and repair, equipment storage, wholesalers, things of that nature. So just to confirm, he is fitting with those types of land uses. And then if there are landscape materials stored or sold for retail or wholesale markets on the site, but those are accessory to a use that's otherwise permitted by right. So for example, his retail, greenhouse operation and the services he provides would be the primary use, in my view. The storage aspect of it, some of the materials needed for his business would be an accessory use, and that would be permitted in B3 zoning. So that enables you to approve that without any additional conditional use permit requirements. And then just to point out, his site plan of operation needs approval by the county as well. He has submitted that to them as noted. The application certainly complete at this point. He's been working on it for a while. The other changes are that he has modified the plans a bit to reflect your feedback from November, as well as the staff comments that we provided. He did include the building. So he had shared with you in November an alternate site plan. I believe that was not in the packets. It included a greenhouse building up on the north end of the site, as well as a garden shed. Those would be accessory to his business use. Those are included now on the site plan, so they're clearly part of the proposal. It would be a 1,600 square foot greenhouse and a 900 square foot garden shed for storing equipment. He did up the amount of parking. So you'll notice in the middle of the site, the other significant change is that the existing house there that is a triplex rental that is proposed to be demolished, but still on a longer time frame. I think Tom has indicated 2 to 3 years from now, perhaps, but he's asking for approval right now of a plan that shows that house demolished and replaced with parking for his business. So that would also help him achieve more parking for his customers, which we did discuss in November. Seemed like he might need more parking. So he achieves that. He modified his signage a little bit, moved that. So everything meets setbacks. There was some discussion of non-conforming buildings last month. I think I just didn't have a clear enough sense of how the regulations apply on the site, but I believe that everything is actually conforming. I don't think there are any issues with non-conforming. So just so we can be clear that that issue, I think, has gone away. So he's now proposing a total of 46 parking stalls, up from either 26 or 33 last month. I would point out there's still a retaining wall is proposed on the north end. It's a 2-foot wall, so very low, but it does lie within 75 feet of a creek ordinary high water mark. And for that reason, it does need explicit plan commission approval. So it's pointed out in the staff memo so that you are aware. If you want to approve that, it would be part of this. And staff, including myself and the town engineer, believe that it should be approved, and certainly Mitch can speak to that if there's anything additional we need to add there. There is also a thing to note in the very north end of the site, there's a footbridge or cart bridge proposed. I don't know if the timing of constructing that, but that, is a longer range plan for connecting this parcel to lands to the north, just to enable another route for pedestrians and carts. But it's kind of a minor note on here. There's new signage. You see that on the agenda later tonight. He is proposing a business sign as well, so you get to see the full package of what he's proposing. Other details of the proposal. Here I'm just looking at the memo. He is proposing 35 total employees, about 25 full-time and 10 part-time. So that's the site plan of operation before you. Operating hours have not changed since last month. So the contractor piece would be Monday to Friday, 6:30 to 7 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 5. The retail component of it would be Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Sunday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., according to the application. And operating season really from April 1 to frost for the landscaping piece, winter for snow plowing, seasonal. Peak period would be April 15th to June 30th, thereabouts. We talked about the B3 zoning. Offer certain comments in here. There's no land division proposed. I point out in here the staff recommendation is if you're comfortable approving this tonight, site plan of operation, the staff memo offers some standard condition type language, but then among the staff comments, I just call out here on the slide in red the comments that are really meant to be, I guess, relevant as a condition of approval. Some of my comments are more informational or confirming that he meets the standards, for example. I wouldn't think those need to be, technically part of your motion, but however you decide to make it, is fine. But I just call out these comments. There's about 9 of them that are more intended for the applicant and something to carry forward. I'm just checking for any other comments to note. I guess that's all I have to say right now. If you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions from the board, Brian?
Not at the moment.
Chad?
He has the business time of operation listed from 9 o'clock Saturday. And Rachel just stated that he's going to open the retail at 8. The hours are not matching.
I'm, to be perfectly honest with you, I haven't studied it well enough to tell you an exact time. Whatever's common, whatever's typical, whatever Johnson's does or somebody related in nursery retail sales, I suppose is something we can shoot for.
So this is what you're supposed to tell us.
Okay. So I think 8 o'clock is a reasonable time.
So you're gonna not get there before 8 o'clock? Like you're not gonna get there at 7:30 and open it?
Well, I think it's a little bit, it's confusing because our retail shop might open up later than the landscape business. So the landscape guys are going to be on site, no later than 7 o'clock. They'll be there at 6:30 and rolling.
So operating time is not the time you let the public in, it's the time you're there.
Okay, got it.
So
So
we need the times here to be when you're there. So
Okay.
what times do you think that'll be?
it'll be 6:30 to, I would say 6:30 to 6:30.
On when?
Mondays through Fridays.
So you have 6:30 to 7 p.m. now, Monday through Friday.
Okay,
I don't think anybody's gonna have an issue with that.
6:37.
6:30 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay, perfect.
Should we denote a.m. on there because it just says 6:30? And then on Saturdays, you have 9 to 5 and Sunday 9 to 5.
I think that's reasonable.
So you're not gonna get there at 8 o'clock on Saturday or Sunday?
Wow. I
Again.
guess we should probably say 7 then.
Okay.
What if we say 7 to 5 on Saturdays and Sundays?
Okay.
Right, you gotta tell us.
Okay, so Saturdays and Sundays, 7 to 5.
Okay, so on Saturday and Sunday, you can't be occupying that building before 7 AM. It's different if you're stopping by to get something, but if you're doing business operations, you cannot start before 7 AM on Saturdays and Sundays.
Got it. Yep,
Okay.
understood.
Okay, just so we're all clear. We can just denote 7 AM and 5 PM on, I know it sounds stupid, but on the plan of operation there. Okay,
That was the only discrepancy I found.
okay, thank you, Jim.
Thanks.
Ed?
There was questions about parking last month. Sounds like that was addressed as far as number of parking spaces. There was also a concern to the north of the property and east of the old Shooters Pub. You wanted to put in I'm going to call it a shade pavilion. And there was a question about the setback. Rachel, was that addressed?
Yes, it was, Ed. Thanks for bringing that up. That's something where I took a closer look at the setback requirements, and I do believe that that is actually complying now, so I didn't ask him to change that after all.
I would not, being a shade pavilion, I assume, Mr. Auer, for hostas, for example?
Exactly.
Okay. It doesn't have walls. It's supported by 4x4 or 8x8 posts, and then there's a screen on top. Would we consider that a permanent structure, Rachel?
I wouldn't consider it a permanent structure necessarily unless it has footings. But what I ran into in the code is the definition of, it's either a definition of building or structure. I can check that right now while we talk. It was very, very expansive, so I felt like it had to apply. It referenced anything that's permanently or temporarily placed on the ground. I mean, it was very, very broad.
Look under accessory.
Okay.
Call it.
And I hope the question isn't inappropriate. I'm just curious because it was an issue that was raised in November.
So these posts that would be supporting the structure, number one, it's a screen material on top, right? We want
Correct.
some sunlight penetration, but the posts themselves are, 2-inch square.
Oh,
So it's a very lightweight, several guys could pick it up and move it. That
Okay.
type of structure.
that type of structure?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
As far as that with the parking stalls, so you're gonna have 25 full-time employees, 10 part-time employees. How many do you anticipate being there at any one time? You
That,
potentially could have 30,
right, but
35 actually.
I would say 75% of them are always offsite. So, when the nursery is up and running, maybe full steam, those 10 people might be there, but that's high.
And where will they be parking?
We've got several in the land plan. You'll see some parking back in I don't want to call it a contractor's yard anymore, but back in that area. And then,
Definitely not a contractor's yard.
right, yeah. So and then there's some new spaces behind the barn to the west side of the barn and a service area back
Are
there.
those included in this 46?
They are.
So if there's potentially 35 people or 35 cars there, that's gonna leave you 11 parking stalls.
And again, there won't be any, 75% of those people never even come to our,
So
to
they
the
don't park
property.
here, they leave.
That's exactly right. They drive from their homes straight to the job site. The only people leaving the shop are going to be guys driving the trucks, and that's one per crew. So we have 3 crews right now.
And I'm just gonna build off Ed's comment, and it's kind of ties in a little bit. I see here you're gonna have coffee, beer, and wine. Now, all 3 of those are very popular among people in this town, especially in this area.
Yeah,
This kind of leads into the parking stalls too, because depending on what you're doing with that could affect how many.
so
You could be the most popular landscape in the entire county.
that's the intent, right? It is part of just the vision to maybe have that as part of the operation. Hey, let's go to the nursery. Let's walk around. We've got a club meeting there tonight, club as in, garden club meeting. Have a glass of wine, enjoy the plants, what have you. Maybe there is an opportunity to serve hot dogs or cheeseburgers, something like this where, we seat like maybe 5 tables outside, just places you can put a beer or a glass of wine down and have a cheeseburger, that type of thing.
So if you're gonna have food, that's a separate thing.
Understood.
So right now, you're just asking for coffee, beer, and wine.
That's right.
So if you anticipate food, you're gonna have to come and change this.
Gotcha.
You do.
That's fine. Absolutely.
Okay, so you're not requesting that here right now.
Do you want me? I
Well,
guess I
think
need
it's
to.
a different level of criteria when you're talking food.
Exactly. So
Yes.
the whole reason I put that in there is because I'm hoping that everybody can put their thoughts together and say, Tom, you're on the right track. Or if you have to take that out of there right now, because you're just trying to get a nursery and a landscape yard going, let's do that. Come back later for the beer and the wine and the coffee thing when you're ready for that. It's just in there as a matter of,
And Brian, Rachel, Kathy, I mean, if they were to start serving burgers and other things, I mean, that actually becomes a conditional use at that time, doesn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
this would be a much,
gotcha. And I thought that conditional use might have been tied to the last conditional use that it was already used for and will then continue to be used for serving burgers. But again, if that needs to be taken out, we can do that.
Lisa just alerted me that actually under state law, you cannot serve wine without food.
You have to serve meals.
Okay, meals, no pretzels? Peanuts?
I can make a meal out of burgers and fries or burgers and chips.
Me too. Okay. So, and I guess then if is that the requirement and you're requesting that I take that out of there, by all means, it's not important right now.
So it would just be, and then you'd have to apply for a beer,
Right.
beer license, a liquor license
Yeah.
at that point. Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Auer, it would be very untypical when you think of the other landscaping entities in southeastern Wisconsin, or at least in the Sussex orbit. It's plants. It's not food. It's not wine. Maybe soda in a machine, in a vending machine.
Sure.
But I mean, you think about Ebert's and other big operations in our area, they don't serve food
No, they definitely don't.
and no alcohol,
Right.
etc.
I've never
Just a
been,
matter of,
for sure. I don't guess I've ever been, called just, run of the mill. So we're just trying to think out of the box. Maybe
Sure.
that's a way to bring in some people it's just something different, right? Rather than going to the bar and sitting and having a glass of wine, you come and shop for plants and have a glass of wine.
Yeah.
That's just strictly, pie in the sky.
you know. Well, as the chairman has pointed out, you're stepping into a different entity and another
Understood.
CUP.
Got it.
I think it would be popular, to be honest with you, and that's why I was
Yeah.
leading in with the parking stalls. I mean, what happens when this grows to the point where you don't have enough? Is there contingency plans to add more? Is there area to add more? Because you're gonna
I
be,
think the McLaughlins are going to be giving me some property to the north of there.
okay.
There
I'm
are,
just-
there are.
This could, in my opinion, could be very popular.
Yes.
And the images you have here, I mean, this is gonna be very, very nice.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So, thank you.
Sounds
So-
like it does make sense for him to come back, since that's a bigger ball of wax maybe, and just
Yeah.
amend the plan when that gets more clear and all the regulations that would apply are clarified.
Just wanna make sure we're thinking ahead on it, is it,
Yeah.
Sure.
so.
Sure.
Yeah,
A
I
lot of
understand.
times things happen and then 5 years from now, a lot of people change and all of a sudden you got a whole new commission going. What were they thinking?
Yeah, got it.
So,
I appreciated seeing that because it sounds like he's not even in business there yet, and he's already offering community space for groups to come in and meet and have amenities for them that other places don't have. So I thought that was great.
I agree.
Thanks, Mark.
So Ed, did we get Ed's questions answered?
The other, now that one idea just left my head, a decorative wall to the north of your property. Rachel mentioned it would be 2 feet high. I would comment that that's a great idea. Because realistically, that creek that runs through there, I have no idea if it's flowing at this point because we've been dry lately. It might be,
Just a trickle.
yeah.
Was
might
there
be
earlier tonight.
if it's really wet. There was also, Rachel mentioned a footbridge. Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah, so this is part of just an idea that we've had that the McLaughlins and I are bouncing around about the possibility of having working that 15-acre parcel that's empty to the north
To
of
the
the
north.
creek
Okay,
into this land plan. So the idea would be that we would supply parking just north of the creek where they have an existing home there. Maybe that gets turned into a coffee shop. Maybe it's something
Mhm.
different. But the point is that we would be able to put the footbridge across the Willow Creek there, and then we'd have that trail that then would cross the private St. James Parkway and onto that 15 acres where we would have a grow and a holding operation for plant material. The idea would be to maybe put like a cool replica barn in there to keep in stride with some of the local flair. So, but still at the same time run our business out of that portion, which would be more of the wholesale operation. So, but people could still, travel from point A to point B, whether it be by cart. Hey, Mrs. Smith wants to see her 20-foot maple, firsthand before she buys it. So we take her in the cart across the bridge over to the growing field, and she picks out her plant, et cetera, et cetera. So there's
Okay.
room there. And I've talked to the DNR a little bit about this, just just to see if it's even possible, right? Right now, we're just dreaming about this, and it really is just a matter of seeing what we can do and what we can't.
Well, thank you for your comment. It's in the same entity as the discussion we just had in terms of the food operation. The other final question I have, there is an access road that is just south of the old Shooters Hub. And I believe it's mentioned in the plan that you're going to close that off or put a gate across. So people because it was apparently used at one time for mobile home trailers to get into
That's right.
the park.
They would stage them up in the Shooters parking lot and then bring them in to install them.
Okay, but that road would be closed, right?
It would be, and it's
Okay.
not a road. It's
It's a path. It looks
It's
like an
more of a-
aerial. It looks like a pathway.
exactly, and I think it was just a friendly neighbor thing, in these past years where they would allow them access through there. They work for the park. They know them, the owners quite well. So it was just yeah, sure, come on through.
Okay,
That's fine.
all right. Thank you.
Okay. Becky, any questions?
No, all my questions have been answered.
Mark?
No, I think we've talked about the stuff that I had a question about. And again, I just wanted to say this looks like, to me anyway, a perfect fit for the area and very responsible implementation for considering the area, the physical area itself. And I'm very happy actually that we've gotten what appears to be the issues out of the way.
Thanks, Mark.
Right. Anything else from staff?
No.
No. All right. Well, is there anyone ready to make a motion on this item?
I will, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I would move that Tom Hour / the Ground Crafter LLC be approved for the approval of site plan and plan of operation for the property located at West 220 North 6437 Town Line Road, tax number of 0240.992.002, with special attention to planner recommendations dated December 2nd, 2020.
All right, is there a second?
Before the beer wine aspect of it all, was it, what was the plan, the ultimate conclusion there?
Do we,
That right now is included in the site plan and plan operation, correct?
I believe the wine was, the wine was removed. So state law would not allow it.
Okay, so it's, all right, gotcha, just want to
They
make
would
sure.
actually have to separately apply for beer and wine, and it would have to be published in the newspaper. They would have to apply
Yeah.
for those licenses.
Right, I want to make sure that it wasn't somewhere in here that I didn't see it, and, yeah, okay, we're good.
but thank you.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Brian. Okay, and just to be clear, the motion, the second, this is changing with the hours of operation that he had changed and.
Correct, for weekdays and then on weekends.
Okay, so that's
Correct.
all consistent with what we discussed here tonight.
Yes. Perfect agreement.
Anything else you need to add? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. All right, item C, Tom Aller, the Ground Crafter LLC for approval of a sign permit for the property located at West 220 North 6437 Town Line Road, LSPT 0240.992.002. Rachel.
All right, so we have Mr. Hour's sign proposal here. This would be a monument ground sign. You'd seen some images previously in his renderings, and he's modified it slightly in order to comply with the town's new sign code. Section 5 of your Chapter 11 zoning code. What's proposed here is a sign that you'll see in a moment here. I'll show it on the screen, but it's 72 square feet, 5 feet tall for the primary structure, with technically 6 feet tall. It contains a small logo light box on the top. It would be lit with a few 3 low voltage lights listed as 151 lumens, which for comparison, I like the headlight comparison we talked about last month. So that was, compared to like 700 lumens would be a typical car or motorcycle headlight based on what I've seen. So that's the type of lighting we're talking here. It's similar to his other accessory lighting proposed for the site. I'd be landscaped with, I'll show this in a moment too. It's a planting bed with perennials, shrubs, some pine trees. It's really integrated with his site landscaping. And under the new sign code, this would have to be, there's limitations on a lit sign between 11 p.m. and sunrise. I believe Tom has agreed to that. So I just want to confirm that in this meeting, if he'd be willing to have that either set on a timer or, not have it lit during those hours, that would be what the code requires. Otherwise, the sign meets standards in your ordinance for location and landscaping. Also size, but I want to discuss that. Here, I'll show you a picture of the sign on the slides. The ordinance allows for, sorry, let me bounce back here for a second. So 60 square feet would be the typical size of sign allowed in your B3 zoning district. But the code also allows, if you recall, with the update, it gives you a chance to flex on any standard within 20% if additional landscaping is provided equal to the additional amount of sign face. So the 20% would get him 72 square feet of signage, which is exactly what he's proposing here. And in the sign area, he separated these pillars. These would be kind of integrated with his fencing, the perimeter fencing around his site. So these are excluded from that sign calculation for sign area because of the way sign area is defined in your code. So we're only counting the centerpiece here. That's the stone with his company name and information on it, plus the logo light box up top. Those are the pieces that I included in the square footage. And would like to just confirm that if Plan Commission agrees with my analysis, that I think he's providing the additional 12 square feet of landscaping. That is based on the planting plan. And here you see a zoomed in version of that. This is the sign kind of located right here. It's got some larger trees in the vicinity. It's got several smaller shrubs, a lot of plantings. So, a pretty robust planting bed is where this would be situated. And these smaller, darker shaded circles are reflective of the lighting that he would have on site, some of which is just perimeter lighting for his fencing. A few of these would be lighting the sign here. And we're recommending approval of the sign if you agree with that and agree with the size and the way he's treating that. You could also request additional information or defer or deny the application if you see fit, but staff does recommend approval.
Questions from the board? Brian?
No, looks good.
Okay. Ed?
Nothing.
Becky?
Nothing?
Mark?
Nope, looks good.
All right, just be clear on the hours of operation for the sign. Be clear on that. Yep. Control that. Yes, sir. Okay. Anything else to add from anyone? Is there a motion on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that Tom Hour and the Ground Crafter LLC for approval of sign permit for the property located at West 220 North 6437 Town Line Road, tax code 0240.992.002 be approved as presented with notes from December 2nd, 2020. What am I forgetting?
20% of the sign. Allowance, you okay with that?
Yes, and was there a question about the lighting?
No, it just kind of was going into detail on what he's proposing, but it, in my view, if it's shielded properly, and I think based on the fixtures he's proposing, they would meet the code requirements. And
Okay.
if there were issues with regard to that, if there was a nuisance or something caused by the lights, you'd have the ability to, reference that and work with the owner on rectifying the issue, I think.
Okay. Well, last month I made a mistake on that, so I just wanted to be sure.
Is there a second?
I'll second. Somebody didn't.
Sorry, Mark.
Sorry, Mark.
No problem.
Motion made and seconded. Everything covered on that motion, we're good?
I think so.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Just one thing to add, and this wasn't really part of the discussion, so to say, but Jane had brought up that in the years ago, the Shooter's Barn was actually a safe haven for a lot of people in the mobile home, like if there was a tornado or something happened.
Yes.
I don't know if that's still a safety plan, if that's what's in place for the mobile home park or not, but
They use the church a lot in the high school. So, and then the office is a concrete building that doors never locked. So
Okay.
they can go in there too.
the office in,
On the
In the
grounds?
park.
Okay.
in the park. Okay. Just so we have some, I don't know if it was officially on something that was in the CUP
Time they
for that.
realize there's a storm, they're not even out of bed. It takes no,
Just so they have a plan.
Yeah.
I don't remember, I don't know what the CUP was for back then, but Jane seemed to remember that this barn
yeah,
was
there's
in that.
people that have keys for the church and they dig over there.
And that right in the beginning of all this, somebody had mentioned that it was a designated tornado shelter. So by all means, if I need to give the codes out to the door, it's a simple code. I'm all for that. Absolutely.
I think it's something just to work out with the owners of the, obviously. I don't know if that was in the original condition use. I don't know that we even have that on file anymore, to be honest with you, but just, it's something Jane had brought up and I thought it was a valid concern. Okay.
I would like to just thank everybody who's helped me through this whole process. It's been almost a year long and seriously, especially Rachel, you guys have done a knockout job and I do appreciate your time. I know I've been kind of a hassle at times. So thank you very much for your professionalism and your expertise. It really has gone a long way.
Thank you, Tom. You've been great to work with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We're really excited to see what you can do there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Well, now, the item everybody's been waiting for, item D.
Holding my breath.
Yes, discussion and necessary action regarding proposed amendments to the chapter 11 of the zoning code related to conditional use permits and subsequent recommendation to the town board.
Are you all really that excited about this?
Oh,
We are.
like 40 people here to talk about it.
All right. We've got some teed up here and I would ask my colleague Michael here to, if I'm missing something or you want, something from a legal standpoint, I think I put together the memo, an effort to kind of help with the conversation, describe the law, but I don't know that I really described the specifics of the law very well, although the town clerk did provide a nice piece from the League of Wisconsin Municipalities that does that. So I think with the information you have in the packet, hopefully that clarifies what that law did back in 2017. So kind of in a nutshell, what Act 67 did, it just kind of forced communities to be more consistent with how they review and approve conditional uses, or CUPs as we call them. It makes it so that there's less of discretion on a given application. So it's supposed to be based on substantial evidence, and there's a specific definition of that now in statutes, that it can't just be like conjecture. It has to be actual facts, things that the applicant provides that really are, clear, concrete things that aren't just speculation. Like it can't be based on fears of property values changing, for example. There has to be some basis of fact behind whether the project or proposed use would be a positive impact or negative impact. So those are things that the Lisbon should be considering when reviewing these. As far as criteria and conditions of approval that apply to conditional uses, they should be reasonable, and to the extent practical, they should be measurable. So that just gives you an idea of where the state was going with those requirements.
Rachel, does everybody on the, this is really probably the meat and potatoes of what this is. I mean, that everybody in the planning commission understands this. Now, most of us were here for a certain gas station that went in. I tried to go in years ago. Everybody understands that, like, how we're supposed to weigh evidence when people are speaking about things. So like, if you're putting in a gas station and somebody comes forward and says it's gonna lower my property values, but provides no evidence to the effect of that, or says that this is gonna contaminate my well, provides no evidence to the effect of that, how you're supposed to weigh this. You know, somebody coming in and saying, I don't want this because of such and such, but brings in a study and says, you know, in this case, on this property, this is what happened, and this is what was found to be, or case law they bring in and such that can prove that, should be weighed differently than just a personal opinion.
Right. This is Noel Geyer. I'm
Noel.
not sure.
Oh.
Yeah, I know I'm
Well,
just jumping back in on here, so I'll go in whenever you tell me I can talk, so.
so I didn't know you were back on. You got cut off before. I'll let you chime in with any questions you might have right now. But right now, the meeting is actually between the board and staff. But since you got cut off, I had said before, I let you chime in with any questions you might have. So go ahead.
Okay, well, from what I read from your documents, yes, the state did say that you have to be much more specific on what you're going to require for conditions, and that you can't deviate from one site to another very easily. The thing that I wanted to point out was that the state is saying if you have a zoned use and you give an approval to that landowner to purchase that property, they know they can build whatever X, Y, or Z on that property because it's already zoned for that. But if it's not zoned for that, the biggest thing is making sure you don't zone it for that if you're going to possibly impact those around that property. So changing the zoning or kind of trying to fit things in where we could before with conditional use permits and trying to appease people around the property and the landowner isn't as easy anymore because they're taking away the power of the CUP to do that. But they are still allowing the town zoning group to be able to say this is zoned for a gas station or this isn't zoned for a gas station. And so by changing those zonings, that's when you actually can make your decision up front more or less than trying to, it's more black and white, basically. You're trying to say, yes, it's zoned for this or no, it's not zoned for this. You can put, slight nuances like you did with the last gentleman, when the lighting is, when the time of day is, and that kind of thing. But changing the actual zoning use for that property is when you make your decision. That's all I wanted to say, is be very careful of what you're zoning these properties for right up front, because that's what it's saying, is make your decision up front. Don't try and fit a square peg into a round hole after it's already been zoned. So some of the properties around me have been rezoned later and impacted me. So that's where I'm saying don't rezone it. It's already zoned for what it was zoned for, and then you impact those around you. I had a couple other just quick thoughts on what you're making changes on, whether or not to notify individuals within 500 feet, or if you could do less. I think you don't have to do anything, but you should notify people at least 500 feet away, because obviously if that conditionally or that zoned area is going to be potentially impacting others around them, they'd want to be able to speak to that, unless you're afraid of what others are going to say to you to try and, convince you otherwise. But I do think that the 500 feet is minimal. because I know, for instance, that property that we were just discussing would be pretty much onto itself if you're trying to look to 500 feet from it. If you go less than that, it's not even across the street. So you're not going to reach potentially impacting others. And those were probably my primary things I looked at.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thank you for the comments. Okay, and Rachel, you can go then. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off before. I just wanted to touch on those points, which I thought were really poignant for this.
Yes, thank you, Joe. And I think Ms. Geyer's comments are well taken as well. I think that was a good addition behind the intent of the law that matches with my understanding as well. So just to describe in general we're trying to make those edits obviously to comply with state law. But this also gives us an opportunity to try to simplify this section of your zoning code a little bit without trying to do much additional work. But, you know, now that I've had a chance to work with this for about a year, it's, we try to find opportunities to kind of streamline, or if we see things that looked a little unusual for specific land uses. Again, part of the intent of Act 67 was to make things more consistent. And so working with the town attorney, you're trying to make sure that the requirements that you have for individual specific land uses, that there's nothing too onerous for any particular land use that doesn't make sense under the CUP requirements now. So trying to just get those more on par with each other. There was some redundant language as well throughout. I mean, where we could find ways to reference other sections of code, or if it's already covered somewhere else in your zoning code, we thought, why restate that? So trying to cut some of that language out of there just to make it easier to administer this ordinance, and, you know, time saved is very helpful on that for everybody involved. Some zoning district references we fixed up. You know, you've had some code amendments over the course of 2020. So those are reflected here, such as your B4 and your BP zoning districts, your section 27 and 28 of the zoning code, stuff like that. We're trying to catch those in here. The PUD section for planned unit developments, that was a large chunk of section 4, and that's now gone because you already approved that earlier in the year. But just to confirm that we took that out of here and it's not shown in your clean version of code here. Did add a truck wash land use. That's something where there's just some proposed language in here, some standards. We can take a look at that. That's something that came up in early 2020 where the town didn't have something in the ordinance to really help you handle a proposal for that. And we think that one is still kind of waiting in the wings that might come through. Whether that one comes forward or not, I think you still should have something in your code to enable you to respond to that and have you planning ahead for that type of land use. A total, love saying this part, that section 4 is now reduced. It was about 43 pages, now it's 26. So that gives you an idea of the bulk that was cut out of this thing. A lot of that was your planned unit developments, but we're making an effort there while still keeping the intent and the regulations that we think make sense for the town and what you've already built into your ordinance. There are specific, I hope I didn't skip a slide here. Okay, so in the staff memo that I provided, hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at it. My expectation is tonight was probably going to be discussion. There are some further edits that Michael and I think are probably needed. I know the attorney wants to take another look at the communication infrastructure like cell towers and just make sure that that reflects current state law, because there have been some changes as well there in recent years. We want to take another look at legal non-conforming uses. Any language related to that, I think warrants a closer look just to make sure while we're at it in section 4 that it's all on the up and up. So you'll probably, I'm guessing you'd want to see this come back in January, you know, give us a chance to kind of tighten up those sections. But we also have some questions for you in the staff memo, just things that I guess I would ask for your feedback on to know if we're going in the right direction. And there's certain things in there that I just thought this is a good chance to check in with you on. Like, do you still want it to read this way, or do you want to make any changes? In some cases, I'm not proposing that it get changed, but this is the chance for you to kind of, you know, consider that. So if you want on the slide here, I can kind of tick through some of these. I don't, if it makes sense to just take them one at a time and you can take whichever ones up that you want, or, but for example, I want to know in general, does the review criteria that we propose make sense? I could toggle back and forth on the screen here, but you see kind of in general, we tried to clean up the headings a little bit just to lump things together in a more logical grouping as you read through section 4. Because it kind of makes sense, some things were sort of referenced in different parts that I think belong together in a more logical way, so we tried to do that, but we did include language in the code here. I'm showing, hopefully you can see it, for substantial evidence, and we add the definition in here. So your general standards, it has to be facts and information other than merely personal preferences or speculation, directly pertaining to the requirements and conditions an applicant must meet to get a CUP, and that a reasonable person would accept in support of that conclusion. So that having that in your code is nice, and it gives you a clear sense of that is what the law says, and now it's what your ordinance would say if you adopt these amendments.
Can I ask you a question quick about that? I thought it was really good, some of the references to other sections that you took out that were like repetitive, but also because if those other sections get amended and you don't find all those references in all the different ordinances, then you end up with ordinances that conflict with each other. And I'm wondering if, I like this definition of substantial evidence in front of us, but I wonder if that should have some kind of a qualifier on there that it means what it says in the state statute and include the statute number. And you can leave this in there as some kind of information, maybe, or maybe it should just refer to the statute so that if that statute changes, we're not out of date. We don't have to run back and edit this language then. I like having the language in the ordinance so that it's easier to find and see, but we run into the same problem then where the state changes the statute and all of a sudden our ordinance is in conflict. And until we change it, we're really unable to proceed with some things.
Great point, Mark.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well. We could certainly add a reference to the statute section. That would be easy. If the town attorney has any thoughts on that, or if that just easy add.
Yeah, no, I think that's an easy add, consistent with the purposes of, and cite the statute upper. That, yeah, very, very good point, Mark.
So,
and then so on the question of the standard conditions, just you'll see that in here, it would be subsection E, where this is just in reference to, section D would be your general standards. So these would be ones that every conditional use would have to meet.
Rachel.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just want to go with section D real quick here too, with the general review area. As far as when the applicant comes in, I mean, do we have a form that we're going to be able to give them that basically, hey, this is what you're going to have to go through? And I know it's going to be important for us too, because like, I don't know what the applicant is supposed to provide substantial evidence that they meet all these and an understanding of what that means. Because I've been through this process. I was one of the first people to go through this process in another community, and nobody had any idea what to do. I mean, I literally went through 6 pages and I had to provide evidence, like actual evidence the first time. And then the second time I went through it, they said, well, just state you're going to do it. So I guess what do we use as a criteria for that? I mean, like tonight I asked Tom, you're going to meet these criteria. You're going to meet this, meet this, meet this, and meet this. I'm assuming that's what they're intending there, but is this left up to the community? Is this something the state has decided it's going to be, you need to provide this kind of evidence for this?
No, the state has left it pretty broad as to what the meaning of substantial evidence is, and that's then left up to interpretation for both municipalities and the courts. So it's really broad. I mean, I think the standards that are reflected in the general standards portion of the proposed CU ordinance would be sufficient to fit into a form of, can you support, check every box here of each of these general standards that's identified in the ordinance. And then if it's a particular use, it may require a couple other criteria that need to be met, and that's found in the particular conditional use that's being applied for, if you will. So am I answering?
I think so. And it's just, some of this is almost, and like I said, I've been through this on both ends now.
Yeah.
It's almost a double standard in some instances. Like you go to item F, the proposed use shall not injure the use and enjoyment of the property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish or impair the property values within the neighborhood. So they're having to state that they're not going to do that, but it says substantial evidence. But yet on the other end, somebody comes in, like I was talking about, you're supposed to weigh evidence differently. Like somebody just coming in and saying it won't, but now we're expecting the applicant to say, there's somebody against it says it will, and then the applicant comes in and says it won't, and neither one of these people provide evidence.
Yeah.
How do we weigh that?
Well, I
Because
think,
that's actually different than when I went through.
Yeah, I could say, Joe, we are in the process of updating Lisbon's forms. So one of my goals certainly was to have a new CUP form that would list criteria like this on there. And at a minimum, the applicant should have to certify like, yes, I would or would not do these things. Oftentimes I've seen forms that just allow some space for them to write in, and I'm always happy to talk with people and say like, here's the criteria. Why do you think you would meet this? At least say something that you think would speak to this, even if it's in their own words, or, it might be tricky sometimes, but I can always help by providing an example. Sometimes the descriptions that people give are a little weak because it can be kind of hard to try to address these types of things. So I guess we're working on a form that would try to be user-friendly and something that would make sense to your average person who's just trying to get through the, the mechanisms here of zoning.
But to that,
You can also do examples. I've seen some communities on their CUP forms provide some examples of the types of statements that would, pass muster. That'd be kind of going above and beyond. I don't know if you want to go that far or not, or just give them some space to sort of speak to these criteria themselves.
well, and looking at this, like item E is measurable. The proposed use should not be noxious or offensive by reason of vibration, noise, odor, dust, smoke, or gas. You can measure any of those. That's something that's measurable. Item F, if they come in, like I said, if the applicant comes in and says it won't, and somebody else comes in and says it will, and this is something we've seen a lot of. This is something, you are always hearing every time a subdivision goes in or something else, that this is going to lower the property values. Nobody ever brings evidence either way, but it's always said. And this is something we're going to have to measure what's considered substantial and not substantial. And we're expecting that the applicant says, you're going to bring substantial evidence support that it won't. Nobody's going to bring in a report every time saying this isn't going to happen, and nor do we want to sit here and have to go through that. But it's just a question I have with that. To Noel's point before, talking about zoning, and this is where the zoning is going to be very important, and obviously the next item we're going to talk about tonight is our comprehensive plan. You are in a sense giving, if you zone the property a certain way, and in that zoning, you allow these uses with a conditional use, we've lost our ability to limit them in a lot of areas. Subdivisions is different with the PUDs and such, but if it's a conditional use, we have really lost our ability to say no.
Well, if I may,
Yeah,
it does make the difference on what you put in the CUP requirements. So you can tighten that up, and that's why the rewrite of your CUP is so important, because you can tighten that up to make it, if somebody's asking for that CUP, that it's difficult they have to follow all of these rules. The problem is if you just have the CUP and the type of CUP and there's no conditions to it, and then they have nothing to have to prove to you. I came from a community where both the applicant and the public had to make if they're going to say that it's going to lower my property values, they had to have proof. Otherwise, it was not taken into consideration. But at the same time, a counter argument from the applicant would be, I have done this same footprint or very close, and looking at the property values before and after, I have proof that it did not lower it in another subdivision. So those are the type of things that were done at my previous position. But one of the things, because CUPs changed, you don't have that ability to make the decisions on the fly. One of the things you might want to also look at is going through every one of our CUPs and see if it's something that we want to keep as a CUP at all, or if we want to make it allowable in a specific district. I don't think we've gotten to that or gone through each type of CUP in the past yet, but that would be like we had airports. We got rid of the airports as a CUP. There's no place in the town that I came from to put an airport, but yet it was in there. And so if somebody wanted to put a small aircraft type airport on their 40 acres, now we've got a problem because we had nothing in it except airport. So we want to make sure that all our CPs have really good standards and requirements and check to see if there's any CUPs that we no longer want to put as a possibility or that are now we have approved or you have approved many times and should be considered permitted uses. So there's more work to be done, but I think this is the first step in getting some of these things tightened down.
And that was just what, like with F, I mean, that was just the one I'm picking on, obviously, because it's, both sides are, the applicant and the respondents are supposed to essentially provide substantial evidence, but applicants never do.
No.
Is F required under the statute? Because I don't know how to measure that. I don't know how anyone would ever provide us evidence that their enjoyment of their property would be diminished. But we will certainly get people coming in to tell us that. If that's a standard that we have to somehow satisfy, how would we do that?
So
One reason that, one thing that Kathy just mentioned for referencing other similar sites, that'd be the first thing I would go to for item F, certainly. And to say, is there reasonable, are there examples elsewhere? If you could point to some and a reasonable person, quote unquote, could, find that would or would not impact property values. I think that's kind of the first test of it. As far as like reasonable enjoyment of a property, I think I would want to ask the person claiming that they're impacted, well, how are you impacted? Can you still use your property for the things that it is zoned for, the things that you are legally allowed to use it for? If you cannot use it in those ways, I would say then you are substantially impacted. Then you get into kind of a little more fine grain then with that discussion, but I think they would have to come with some evidence that they, how are they affected? That they really have to get more specific and not just say, well, it's, if it's noise or something, I mean, you can quantify noise, you can find other examples elsewhere, you can measure it. So I think that's kind of where you go with those. And maybe there's case law that could help as well, other examples.
So I'll add one point too, as it relates to reasonableness. I mean, built in the definition in the statute of substantial evidence is, what a reasonable person, would come to accept of the condition or the requirements incorporated in the CUP. So that ultimately comes down to the Plan Commission's conclusion is it reasonable to place this requirement or to consider this evidence? So when two people show up and one says it's going to raise my property values and the other one says it's going to decrease property values, well, one, you got it as a consideration. Is it reasonable to believe that property values would in fact, be decreased? And in addition to that consideration is, do I have facts to make that reasonableness conclusion? As a Plan Commission, if you can't get to that point, then it shouldn't be part of your consideration.
Yeah, and I don't have really any problem with value because that you can quantify that by looking at other developments and doing some different things. But the word that causes me problem in F is enjoyment. Somebody's going to come in and say, look, I bought this place, and we've had this happen before, so that I could look at the landscape and the trees. Now my neighbor wants to cut down trees and put a house there, and I don't think they should be allowed to do that because then I won't any longer be able to enjoy my view. Well, I don't like that word enjoyment. I don't know how to quantify it, and it's really an opinion, and I don't. There's no way to satisfy someone when they show up and say, well, I'm the one that lives there and I'm not going to enjoy it as much because this is going to happen. And well, how do I, there's no way to refute that. And then, when they come, they believe they have a rock solid way of determining what their neighbor can do with their property. And then we're left to try and tell them, well, yes, no, or why, or not, or I don't know. I don't want to get hung up on one word in this whole thing here, but
this isn't the state that's given us these criteria. This is going to be ours.
Right.
And this is an assessment.
You take that word out.
I mean, this is in a sense turning the plan commission into like a quasi judicial
Right.
entity.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's what it's doing.
Mm-hmm. And,
Absolutely.
yep, and I will say too, as it
That
relates-
is not statutory language here, but we've used, relied on some resources like model ordinance language from the UW extension, looked at a couple other communities. I know Dane County recently redid their conditional use ordinance, which is so much better than it used to be and simpler. Another town. And so that's kind of where this is coming from, but you're right that it's not necessarily statutory. So there you have some wiggle room there.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't go back and I didn't have time to really compare this to the statute. So that was a question, but if we don't have to use that word enjoyment, which seems really subjective to me, I'd rather not see that.
I agree.
Yep, we can rework that.
Certainly, and I will add just one final point too. In the fun legal world, usually enjoyment of property is used synonymously with use of your property. In this case, as you look at F, I mean, we've got use and enjoyment. It's kind of, yeah, a little redundant. So, yeah, there's a lot of flexibility here to, cut. And that was kind of our goal, hopefully in the end, is let's try to make this as consistent and clear cut as possible. So, there's a prime example of something that could be cleaned up.
Are we moving kind of like through, because I had one real quick question on 4A5.
Sorry, I kind of started on D. That's bad form here.
I mean, if we're going to go back to some other parts, that's fine. But if we're going to just keep moving through, I just had a real quick one on.
Yeah, go for it.
So it says that only those uses that are listed as conditional uses in a zoning district shall be authorized. Or should the word shall be may, or is conditional supposed to be allowed? That sentence seems to go contradict itself in the way I'm reading it, where if it's a conditional use and there's conditions, shall seems to say we have to authorize it. Either that or the word conditional is supposed to mean authorized uses or permitted use, or and then they shall be authorized. I don't know, either the word shall, to me, either the word shall should be may or conditional should be permitted. Unless I'm reading that totally wrong.
No, that's a good question. I know Michael and I did kick that one around a little bit. Let's see. Oh, that's why we referenced section 3D. So back in your section of zoning code that talks about general use regulations. Now I'm looking for which one that is.
Well, it's like other conditional uses determined by the plan commission may be acceptable. I agree with Mark, we should maybe zoning district may be authorized.
Yeah.
Shall be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can be.
Like that. The idea there is just, the goal is to try to say if there's some use you didn't anticipate, somebody's got a weird business model, we can't anticipate everything someone wants to do. So you have the ability to say this kind of fits with these other uses. So therefore you could process it as a conditional use.
Oh, so shall maybe, if I read that, if the way you were thinking of it, only those listed as conditional must be authorized or something like that. I don't know. I understand what you're saying now as you're talking, but I don't think those words mean that. At least not as I read them.
Yeah, I think may would work better. Do you think, Michael?
Mm-hmm. Certainly. And, frankly, that, whole first sentence in 5 could probably be, cut completely. It's pretty obvious that if it's enumerated in, the sections below, it's a conditional use. And then anything that's not identified may, be acceptable, subject to the plan commission finding that the certain standards in section 3 and 4 are met. So that might be a way to just get rid of that confusion completely. Oh, no, I'm sorry, first sentence. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can take another look at that.
Don't worry, I didn't have time to get that in depth on the rest of this stuff. We won't be here all night.
You promise?
I promise, Ed.
Okay. Yep.
And so this just explains like, what is CUP, kind of why would we be dealing with a conditional use at all? A lot of this, I think, is well, mainly language from the existing code,
Mhm.
kind of rearranged.
I missed these things.
Okay.
Application requirements, I wanted to make sure that was clear. Let me revisit the slide for a moment here. So one of the requirements, for example, is that with a conditional use, people have to submit a full site plan of operation to go with it. I don't necessarily take issue with that. I just want to confirm, do you still want that to be a, explicit requirement? We try to make clear in here. It's nice for me if I can have like a checklist, and this would be something that would be great on an application form. If you're applying for a conditional use permit, you have to provide these things, and that really takes the questions out of it for someone like myself or any staff person. So that's what we're trying to do here. So we say we need a map showing the property, some lands around it, something to scale, not just something scratched on a napkin. Written description, site plan of operation should go with it. So that's what you have been doing in the past. As written, that would continue. Here we include a legal description. This would be a new thing. Where the conditional use would be effective. So if it was, it could be part of a site. I think currently they get sort of recorded to the entire property or parcel. I think Michael and I both thought it might be good to include here so that you can require a legal description. But I don't know if, do you think that's necessary? It puts more, more burden on the applicant than what they would have now. Although you always have the ability to require, things in addition. There's some general language in the code about that as well.
Mr. Chairman. Rachel, I can't comment on all these things. It's legal question of words, but I think that would be a very good idea. In the history of some cases of Planning Commission, plans that have been brought to us have been more confusing. And this addresses that issue. What I mean, in other words, site or the location of said building or whatever, just it doesn't, it's not adequate. So I don't know about other commission members, but this would place upon the applicant, and it gives the commission, we know what the applicant is asking for, where said building is going to be, or item, road, egress, access, so forth. So we don't have to ask obvious, questions like, where does this belong? So I would be in favor of this item.
Talking about the legal description?
Yes, which is number 1 under section 4, B1.
On the map of the subject property.
Yes.
And that's just slightly modified from what you have now. A lot of this is kind of currently in your code, but we tried to pare it down and make it a little more easy to read.
Yeah.
I find it a little tricky to describe to people what we're looking for sometimes with the current description.
Right, and it's also important, it helps the applicant, because then the applicant knows what is required of them, he or she.
Mhm.
So,
Have we had a problem where we couldn't determine where a CUP was authorized? In other words, why would we ask now for a legal description where a CUP is going to be? I've been thinking, I can't recall a time when it's ever come up.
I will say, I guess I'm curious if there's other examples that the town might have come across with the Tom Hours proposal when we thought that he needed a conditional use for just one aspect of his site. I was thinking that last month actually and going, well, does it make sense to apply it to his entire property if it's not being used in that way? And that's obvious from his site plan. Should it all be subject to that conditional use, especially if it's recorded to the property? I thought in that case, maybe a legal description would be helpful because maybe it's just half the site. I could see a scenario where that might happen. I don't know.
How would someone get a legal description? If they have to hire like a surveyor or somebody to do that for them? Or is that something they could do themselves or?
If it's a lot, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael or anybody else, if you have say a certified survey map or plat, or you've got, a subdivided lot, you can just say it's like lot 1 of CSM 2553. To me, that would satisfy this requirement. Otherwise, if it's some more particular thing that's a part of a site, you would have to get a surveyor to provide a legal description. And
Yeah,
maybe it's the case here that the plan commission could require it if you deem it necessary, and maybe it's not necessary for every application. So that gives you the ability in a weird circumstance to require that. Maybe that would be better.
So we were, my history is that we did require legal description. Mark, the answer to your question is you can get your legal description from your deed. And it's on every deed, every property deed you have. If you're going to split the land and only ask for a CUP on one portion of your land, yes, you would need a surveyor to change that portion. But otherwise, it's on your deed. It's actually on the county website and attached to it.
Yeah, so it seems like to me, we usually have the legal description, or at least a good chunk of it in the agenda item or as part of the packet. If we decide, if we deem that we need to be more descriptive, there wouldn't be anything stopping the town staff or the planner from being more descriptive without requiring the applicant to spend money on that, would there?
But in order to get it, it's right on their property deed. So
Right, but what we're saying here is we want them to define a part of that. We're talking, otherwise, if we're going to use the description for their entire property, this section's irrelevant. What we're talking about, if I understood this right, was a CUP that doesn't pertain to an entire property, but to a portion of a property.
certainly, and when Rachel and I had the discussion about the legal description, the scenario that we contemplated was in the event a conditional use application comes forward and it's a 40-acre property and, well, only 3 acres of it is going to be actually utilized for conditional use. Well, in that situation, you have when everything's done and approved, it's recorded against the property. And so to ensure that, is, clear without a doubt, where that use would occur. That's why, this, legal description, was inserted as kind of contemplating that scenario. But, Mark, as well, if the plan commission's open to it, it could be more of a discretionary item that the plan commission, chooses when it, it needs a legal description for a particular use. That situation would, require it just for more information.
I guess my thought is, instead of putting another thing out there for the applicant to have to do, if staff feels like we need a description of where the CUP is going to take place, or that it would be beneficial to the town, that we should just put it in there. And as part of the CUP and part of the approval, we could approve a CUP for the 3 acres in the southeast corner of a tax key, and we can define it ourselves how we want. I guess I just don't want to keep increasing every things that people have to do in order to even, talk to us, because we want them to have this entire packet done when they come to us. They got to fill this whole thing out before they can come before the plan commission. And like I said, I don't think we've ever had a problem where somebody says, well, this conditional use was granted, but they're doing it on part of the property that was not approved. I can't think of that scenario. And I'm not against this, don't get me wrong. I just think that it's something that the staff or the planner could put in a case where they thought it was relevant in order to protect the town, rather than having every single applicant do it, because it might come up at some point on a big property.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Mark. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, but I think, we have section E here kind of says there's standard conditions that the town could apply to conditional uses, such as these types of things. And even though legal description is not listed, it does talk about phasing or recording restrictive, documents, covenants, things like that. I would think legal description would be something that the town could approve or require, like you're saying, without making it a requirement for everyone. I could just be overthinking that.
Yep, absolutely.
So you want it removed, plan commission members?
I don't think it's a bad thing to have on there, just to have as a record, and it's easy enough to get a legal description. That's my opinion. I mean, every home in the town of Lisbon, I know that's residential. Every home in the town of Lisbon has a legal description on their survey. You know, a legal description on the state website when they apply for their building permits. And legal descriptions are pretty easy to get. And so I don't think it's a bad idea to have it on. This is my opinion.
I'd go either way.
I defer to Brian. Brian. So,
Becky?
Well, what if it's just going to be on part of it? And then they have to get a surveyor to get the actual legal description of where the CUP is gonna be.
I think it was just gonna be on part of it. That's kind of be a requirement anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, then I was saying maybe wouldn't we want to have a survey because if it's on part of it? And for the applicant as well, so they know where their
Well,
boundaries lie.
right, that's what I was gonna ask, if it would be helpful to have them do it if it was just part of it, but.
And, you know, I don't think we've had a problem prior, but I don't think it's a bad idea to have it, I guess. I don't know, does anybody know if it would be a huge cost to the applicant, or is it a consideration that should even be considered if it's a huge cost? Or does it automatically come with their deed, like Kathy said? So it's not a cost at all, they just have to copy and paste.
Well, it's also on the county website.
Sure.
Sounds like it's not really a cost to the applicant if it describes their whole property, those legal descriptions are readily available. This would only come about if it's a part of the property, and in that case, do you want a legal description or do you want them to just kind of like show with lines on their, because in this case, they would be submitting a site plan of operation along with this. So you'd be reviewing and approving one of those. In theory, that site plan of operation, I would think should designate whatever area, they're using for the conditional use, whether that's on a map or in the description. Maybe that's sufficient. But that's probably, fairly rare in those cases where it's just part of the operation, but I could certainly see that coming about. And I have seen this in other ordinances, so that's why it was put in. It wasn't just made up. I'd hate to look for problems that don't exist though, but.
I guess part of a property I'd be for sure. A whole property, maybe it's not as important.
Could say if this conditional use would be operated on only part of the property, then this is required?
That's my opinion, yes. I don't know if everybody else was with me on that or not.
We are going to come back for another round of this probably, so we can always circle back to this again and, in the future, if people want time to mull it over too as well, because I know we are.
So I have the right to change that.
We still have time to change it.
Anything else? Or what do you feel?
No, I mean, I don't think we need it, but I won't vote against it if it's in there.
Okay. All right.
All right. More procedural type stuff. Our public comment got at this a little bit. So currently we say in here, we include a process for reviewing for completeness. So just trying to really spell out what does that process look like? It's in one section. And we say that the town clerk or their designee would review the application for completeness, because saying the zoning administrator would do that refers to the plan commission. Obviously, you're not the ones necessarily reviewing it at the initial intake. So we just wanted to clarify that as a staff function. If you like that language, that's how it's currently worded. There are currently in the code 60-day and 90-day time limits for plan commission and board to act. So I just include that as a question. Do you still want to keep those time limits? That would be a restriction on you. I don't know if there's any legal basis for that, Michael, but that's a question there. Similarly, a time limit to file an appeal. Section 34 of the zoning code already addresses Board of Appeals and says that the person has to file that within 20 days. I think that would also apply to conditional uses here.
That is CSM.
So you believe that the 20 days is the accurate number to use, Rachel?
I think so. That's what your code currently says. So if that is just kind of more of a gut check, do you still think that's reasonable? You know, if someone goes past the 20 days and you say, you can't file an appeal anymore, that's currently what your code would say.
But
If that's ever been an issue or not, so,
are you talking to appeal to Board of Zoning Appeals?
yes. That'd be in subsection C, item C9.
So,
Oh, and here it says 30 days, excuse me.
I thought it was 30. Without a doubt, it's 30 days to appeal to a court. So it's probably best to keep it, if we can keep it at 30 days. If you're appealing a plan commission decision to the BZA or appealing a BZA decision to circuit court.
Whatever the legal requirement is, I think that's what everybody would be
Yeah.
in favor of. Mark, you good with that?
Yeah, I mean, I would just have the same comment as I had before, is that if we're deriving that number from a statute, that, you know, a state statute that obviously we don't control, I think we should reference the statute, and we could put text in there that as of the writing of the ordinance, it was this number of days, but make sure that it's denoted that the statute is controlling, so that we don't have to amend the code every time somebody changes a statute.
Agreed.
All right. How about the 60, 90 days? Do you guys feel comfortable with that? That puts you on a clock? Friendly to the applicant, certainly.
Is that something that's statutorily required, or?
Nothing identified in statute as it relates to, you know, a timeline. Now, there are reasonableness aspects to that. You know, a municipality couldn't just sit on something too. But as far as like it is with a CSM, there's no, it's approved. If not,
60 days scares me.
that's pretty quick.
I mean, you might not even get that with the plan commission meeting.
Mhm.
How does that compare with other communities, or do we know?
It's a good question. I think I did not see time limits like that in the sample ordinance that I reviewed. At least I don't recall that. And the examples from other communities, at least that I checked. I mean, it's certainly possible that that's out there in other codes, but it doesn't have to be. So that's why I thought it might be worth asking you.
I for sure would not be in favor of 60 days.
Yeah, it seems like it could be easy to miss if there's any reason why someone got bumped a month. Or if your agenda was too full, something like that, but they submitted a complete application. Hate for the town to be in trouble there.
No, it's not. It's got to be, you know, way more than that. I would say 90 days is certainly reasonable. And I mean, we could also even add a section there that, you know, with consent from the applicant, it can be extended as well. Oh, that's already in there? Okay. No, that's
Right.
90 days is
Is
certainly
everybody
good.
good with that? Brian, Chad,
Yes.
Yeah.
60 is too short, 90.
Becky?
Yeah.
Mark?
Yeah, 90 is good.
Okay, 90 days.
Thank you. Okay. Apologize to toggling between things here. Annual review. This is a big one because we've talked about this. At least I've discussed it more with your previous administrator. Your code says that the town shall review conditional uses at least once per year. I think, again, that's a good place to use the word may, because unless you're going to pull out every conditional use you've ever approved and review them every year, which I don't know that that's anybody's intent right now. More of an as needed.
I would agree.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mark?
Yep. Which section is this? Is this
That out here.
is this 4E2 by chance?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes, so we're proposing, may be reviewed at least once every year at a time to be determined by the town. Really as a check for compliance. So that gives you the ability to review them. If you think somebody's in violation or there's some issue, you could certainly bring it up, before your commission.
Yeah, okay. Does you only write down the next paragraph 3 there. says the applicant must provide substantial evidence of proposed conditional use meets the CUP requirements and conditions required for initiation of development activity on the subject property. No building permit or certificate of occupancy shall be issued for any development does not comply with the requirements of the CUP or this ordinance. Wouldn't the now my question that I wrote here, and I'm not going to formulate this right now because I don't remember it offhand. My note was, wouldn't we need the information that this section is calling for in order to approve the CUP? I don't understand what this paragraph is asking.
Oh, can you say that again, Mark, just so I'm. What's this requirements?
It sounded, when I read this initially, it sounded like the applicant had to provide the information as to, the activity that was going to take place before the activity took place. But wouldn't that information be what's required in order to get the CUP?
I think it is. Michael, and this seems to me to be kind of related to conditions of approval. So if you're saying, for example, we'll grant the CUP, but you need to get a county permit for some erosion or stormwater and provide that to the town. I would argue that even if they've gone and recorded the CUP and all the conditions, and it's a recorded document, they like don't have the CUP in effect unless they've already fulfilled those conditions. I think that's how I read this. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. The goal behind number 2 here was to, number 3. Yeah, it was to basically on the back end, after an approval has been done and the recording has occurred, that, in the event that there's, issues that are arising with this CUP, that the town's got some authority and some flexibility to take any necessary action to, change, the CUP, or it, basically if it needs to be modified because something has occurred, the town's got the ability to do it. I mean, you can imagine vacant land, CUP is approved, and all of a sudden next door, which was vacant land, all of a sudden has 100 homes that have been approved in that area. And now it's a safety concern has now arisen. Maybe modification, tweak. That's why we've got built-in yearly review. Planning Commission's got some authority then at that point in time to, ask for some additional requirements at that point in time. Is that was the goal behind?
Yeah, I guess and I'll be happy with however you decide to do this, but the sentence reads that upon approval by the Plan Commission, the applicant must provide substantial evidence that it meets the CUP requirements. Well, wouldn't we need that information before we approve it? The sentence doesn't make sense to me, but I mean, if I'm reading that wrong, or there's some other meaning or some other permits that you're referring to, that's fine.
That's how I read it.
Okay.
Make sure we got that clarified.
We can clarify that. Mark, just to make sure you're referring to number 3, right?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that second sentence says upon approval by the Plan Commission, the applicant must provide evidence that the proposed conditional use meets the conditional use requirements. Well, we would have to have that evidence before we approve it.
All right. Yeah, I see. We can clean this section up so it's more clear that you don't have to do things twice in this section. Yeah.
Maybe 2 and 3 can be mushed together in some way or something like that. They seem
Yeah.
kind of- All right. Oh, a similar thing here, a CUP expiration, and I'll go back to the ordinance in a second. Currently, it's written that a CUP would expire if someone didn't pull a building permit within 6 months, if one wasn't issued. That might be reasonable. It might be kind of too tight of a timeline. I'm curious what you think about that. I think that goes under subsection G. Talk about amendments. I'll just clarify too, if someone wants to change, something related to their operation, their conditional use, they would apply for an amendment. Yeah, and this is the part under subsection G 1B. specifies if they haven't commenced their operation within 12 months of your plan commission approval, or if they haven't started construction, with a building permit within 6 months. And then there's an exception for businesses of a seasonal nature, which I think makes sense.
Why do we have a difference between commencing, 6 months, is that reasonable? Is that normal?
Yeah, I mean, 12 months is pretty standard for the use of it all. I think-
Right, then I see.
Yeah,
I don't know if I agree with the 6 months on the construction.
Yeah,
I
I could
suppose-
think of a gas station that might not meet that now, so in theory, they might have had a conditional use expire.
Mhm.
And I can tell you from personal experience that when a municipality decides to throw wrenches at you, 6 months goes by really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't,
Yeah, that should be 12 as well if we can.
Got it.
12
Well-
kind of eases up the need to have a seasonal exception as well, which is a little vague and have some, one person's season is not another's. If we make it 12 months, they got the whole year, all the seasons to do it.
Yeah, so we could cut that whole sentence potentially.
Certainly.
Everybody gets 12 months and end of it.
Kind of thinking.
What's your pleasure, Plan Commission?
Got it?
12 months.
12. Becky,
Well,
Makes sense.
12.
All right. I'll strike that out later. Just highlighting and stuff to help me remember what gets talked about tonight. All right, what else have we got here? Public notices, that one came up. So currently, notices would have to be sent out 500 feet. Just for your reference, I noted that rezones and variances to zoning provisions have to get sent out to 300 feet. I think there's a reason for conditional uses because they can be a little more unusual maybe, or, very specific. And by their nature, they could impact surrounding lands. I think that's why there is a larger area for the notices. And it's a good point to consider the size of lots in Lisbon. If you have larger lots, you obviously want to have it sufficient to catch the neighbors and maybe not just one neighbor, but whatever you think makes sense here. Just put it on there as a gut check.
Should we be consistent with that though? I think I'd agree 300 feet is.
Is the norm.
Is the
300 feet
norm?
is the norm.
And that's
Both, we talked about that today, both of our places that we've worked in the past were just 300 feet. Because it's from the property line, 300
Right.
feet, you can get a tip of another property, and that property is now part of that. Doesn't matter how big that other piece of property is. It doesn't have to encompass it, it just has to touch the edge of another property, and that property is included. But it's your call.
How's everybody feel?
I think 300 is enough.
300 is fine.
I agree.
Becky?
I'm fine with 300. Is that what she said?
Yes.
Mark?
I guess I'd rather see the rezones and variances up to 500 feet so that everything's consistent, but and I just as a reminder, that was one of the comments on the citizen input part of the meeting tonight as well, that they thought the 500 was better than 300. But again, it's not a burning issue. I will support either way.
I guess I'm more of the rezones for me is more the thing than the variances so much. But I tend to agree with Mark. I'm not going to vote this down because it's not, but
Right.
I do think 500 would be. And some of it has to do with some of our life. So in some areas, 300 feet covers a whole, like you said, a whole lot of properties. But in other areas of the town, like around where Becky lives, you might get 2 properties, maybe 3. You get the
Maybe
quarry across the
2.
street, that's 1. Your property, and I don't know how wide those properties are next to you, but they're big.
Right.
We can make it 500 across the board. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
You think we should make that change as part of this code amendment? Because we'll be looking at other sections and not just section 4. I think you can do that as part of this, but I just want to clarify with, I guess, the staff and attorney that makes sense.
Because they're not in the conditional use part, should we make that across, because you're asking for it across the board? Should she add that to our, to this document to make those changes in the zoning code in those other 2 places? The 500. That's all she said.
So this goes in many more documents.
Right.
Like that. This isn't just this. Or is this something we address when we do it?
So in other words, if it's 500 feet here, she's asking if it would be 500 feet for Board of Appeals, for instance. So in other words, right, is that?
For a rezone.
A general
Or a
rezone,
variance.
because right now a general rezone is 300 feet. Nothing to do with the CUP, just a general rezone.
Yeah, so we'd be tacking on a tiny amendment to some text in section 34 to this amendment document.
Definitely we can do that, Rachel, because we already had our public hearing. So I don't think we can address another section without it being part of the public hearing.
Okay.
Address on that end of the code first, and then. have-
Yeah.
I mean, is this the chicken or the egg? I guess.
So if we're gonna keep it at 500, when we start looking at the other code, we know now that we wanna write it to 500. But we can't change it in this process. We have to have another process where we're changing zoning code, and when we change other zoning code and do another public hearing, we can add that as the amendments to the zoning.
Got you.
So this would reflect what that is.
Right.
But this is the process on this.
Yeah, so I think we can park that up. I have a list that I keep anyway, so I'll just add it to the list of future code fixes. And I think we posted notice, so just so you know, if it comes up tonight, I think we posted the notice so that it references various sections of the zoning code. So I think you have the ability to modify other sections with this particular amendment, but I think it should be tied to conditional uses. So if, as long as you're in that wheelhouse, Kathy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that would be appropriate.
And when we were reviewing this CUP ordinance, we were keeping in mind the fact that if we're going to edit something into the CUP ordinance and it was going to implicate other sections, we were trying to just hold off on that. That way we're not doing the entire zoning code because we're doing the CUP ordinance kind of thing. So that was kind of our thought process too. Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
Just realized I might have this not as visible as it should be here. Here we get into specific land uses. So I apologize for this. I'd hoped to give you a nice, easy to read table with all the land uses that are listed in your zoning code and the districts, you know, are they permitted? Are they conditional? Are they not permitted? That's still in progress. There's some sections where the way the land uses are described is a little like wordy and hard to kind of put in a concise matrix or table. So I still recommend adding that. I think that can really aid in reviewing the code and telling someone you're a permitted or conditional use. I could just pull up that one table and get a real quick read of that and then dig into the text of it. For now, we just have the text to work with, so hopefully that will suffice. But if you like the idea of a table, I could, you know, try to finish that up for the next meeting. Thought it might help with discussion, but some also require town board approval, so that's an important question. And I think relates to the idea, you know, the intent of Act 67, and is it fair to require some people go to town board where others can just get a conditional use approved by plan commission? The vast majority of your conditional uses are plan commission. I believe, I think it's just 2. I think it's quarries and cemeteries and similar type of things as cemeteries require town board. And then, yeah, just that question of, you know, do all the uses that are listed make sense to require conditional use? Kathy was getting at that as well. One question I have is major grading permits. We've seen this a lot in the last year, at least. I mean, just since I've started, had a case where someone, I think it was Stark, they came forward with a small, you know, amendment to their site plan that triggered, well, you need to have a berm, do some earthwork. Then that triggered a major grading permit. So they had to come back for another public hearing and a meeting. And the staff time involved in reviewing. I mean, that might be reasonable. You may very well want to keep that, but I thought I would ask the commission, you know, do you think major grading permits should be reviewed as conditional uses, or would you rather that they just have those standards already spelled out in section 3, and is that good enough? You know, because you already have a major grading permit requirement. I guess the question is, does it warrant that public involvement and public notice? I just don't have enough background with Lisbon yet to know, you know, the intent behind all that section. It's quite complicated to administer, but the town engineer normally handles those, but I do have to handle like the conditional use standards aspect of it. So it's just a little unwieldy, and there's a lot of potential there, I think, for the streamlining, you know, how you administer the zoning code, and whether it's staff or consultants, everybody who deals with that, it can get a little complex. So just a question for you.
I think we had talked about this a couple of times actually with the major grading permits. I'll tell you, you tend to get, I mean, tonight, really, but there's a lot of times you get considerable public opinion on moving earth.
Yep.
So I guess my personal preference would be to leave it how we have it right now, even though I know it's more cumbersome at times. But I mean, I think I've been very surprised actually at some of these public hearings we've had of these, the number of people that have shown up for it. I guess a personal preference here would be to keep it. Brian, how do you feel?
I think we should keep it. Maybe up the parameters a little bit, 60 cubic yards and 6,000 square feet. That's something we can discuss at a later date, but 60 cubic yards is just 3 truckloads. So the parameters are pretty small. It used to be smaller. I don't know if you remember that. It used to be 30 cubic yards. Then we upped it to 60. So that's something we can discuss at another time. But answer to your question is, I think they should stay.
I agree.
I agree.
And Becky?
I agree.
Go ahead.
Brian, does the issue that Chairman Stadler has brought up in the past, does that apply? Do you know what I'm talking about? Private home, dirt in the front, nothing being done.
We're working on that.
Okay.
Mark?
Yeah, I agree, but I don't, but I do think that upping the either the size of the area or the amount of dirt moved so it doesn't trigger quite so fast might be a really good thing.
I would agree too.
Can I add one point to all this too? Another possibility that the Planning Commission may want to consider is actually maybe moving the major grading permit requirement into outside the scope of conditional use, but still, if you're going to apply for major or minor grading permit, there is a public hearing requirement, and you know there's still going to be notice to neighboring properties for that grading permit. That way we get out of the criteria of conditional use. When you're having somebody move earthwork or do earthwork, and then you're trying to satisfy substantial evidence, you may end up, it's different when you're saying, okay, that contractor's yard, here's the use, here's the operation, here's what's going on, versus we're building a berm and, you know, it meets the criteria for a major grading permit. However, someone else is complaining that it's too high or it's, you know, not high enough or whatnot, then we might end up into greater concern. So, you know, I'm placing that out there. I'm not saying that it absolutely has to come out of the CU ordinance, but I just want to make sure that at least the Planning Commission's got that component or that scenario out there.
I mean, could we spell out the criteria of when it becomes a conditional use? Because I mean, I think some things probably should have additional use where others don't. I mean, like if you're moving earth in your front yard and you're just leveling, you're gonna need a lot of earth to move and level off your yard. It's gonna affect some stormwater. I mean, we're gonna rely on the experts obviously for that. But if somebody's building Mount St. Lisbon in their yard, obviously that's a different story. I mean, that's, I guess one I would say the engineer should be handling the staff, the other one is more of a conditional use style.
Certainly.
Your section 3C5 spells out a lot of different criteria for moving dirt and landscape berms and things of that sort, where it has a lot of description as far as when it requires a public hearing. And I think to Michael's point, you could still retain all that language and just remove any reference to conditional use standards from that section 3, you know, and from the section 4 here, and just say, yeah, it requires a public hearing, but maybe not the conditional use standards. I sometimes feel, frankly, that my review is a little redundant. I mean, your town engineer handles those grading permit reviews. he really looks at, does this make sense? Does it meet the ordinance? Even though it's in the zoning code, I don't know that I'm always adding much value. I guess I'm just speaking for myself on that. So it's just that time spent reviewing it, adding value to the town. It's a little sometimes square peg round hole when it comes to the CUP criteria.
I've always wondered why it was a use. It's not really a use at all, but you know, off the top of my head, I think it's probably a good idea to get it out of there, out of the conditional use label. But
So we're thinking in terms right now of residential property, so to say, but what about commercial and industrial property? I'm gonna bring up Leeds and Mount St. Lisbon that we currently have. Nobody knows what got there. I mean, that's on dirt. I know where it came from now, but that thing showed up. I don't think we ever issue, I mean, even a permit issue for that, I don't think.
Leeds property?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of, I don't think so.
I mean, that's the biggest thing I've ever seen put up in Lisbon. And it showed up with no permits, no nothing. And it's garbage. It's Highway 16. It's all the crap from Highway 16 is there with topsoil. And that showed up. I mean, something like that, I mean, to me, something like that would need a conditional use. But I agree, like in a yard, I don't think necessarily would. But, I mean, I think it should have been there anyway.
so something like that, though, I mean, that's not just that actually is a use that would need a CUP, right? That's not grading on site, that's bringing fill from off site. That's actually, I don't know. I can go either way on this. I think as he was talking, I thought Mike's point was really good that, for the guy that wants to put in a swimming pool or some of these other things, getting that out of the conditional use thing seems really smart to me, but it won't matter when it comes time to vote which way we do it.
No, I do agree with that. I think there's some things that make sense and some things,
Yeah,
if we just identify the criteria of what's what.
maybe if you guys don't mind, maybe we kind of, Rachel and I and Kathy put our heads together and come back with something that maybe you guys could reconsider, that consider everything that was just discussed. Okay.
I think that sounds great. Can I ask a quick question going back to, oh boy.
No.
No.
Waking up, Mark.
All right. There was, I think it's in section G, and it has to do with transfer of ownership CUPs. And it looks like there was language added that unless there's a limitation put on the CUP at the time of approval, that the CUP shall continue regardless of ownership. And I'm curious if there was a reason for that addition or why it wouldn't be the other way around, where CUPs traditionally would just terminate and somebody wanted to continue that business on a transfer of ownership, that they would come back to us. Would sort of be a built-in way to review some of these things and to be able to talk to new ownership. And I was just curious because we'd been putting some of that language in on an ad hoc basis based on the individual CUP regarding that, and kind of we've been adding it as expires with ownership, and now here I see it's actually inserted the other way around, where unless we say something, it's deemed to continue on forever.
Yeah, so by statute, the default is that it does continue forever. However, the town can place limits on duration, transfer of ownership, or a renewal component too. So the tweak was just to align with the statute, but Mark, yeah, I mean, if Plan Commission wants to put, a requirement in the code that says that, it will be terminated upon ownership, it would still be compliant with the statute. The default is though that
Yeah. Okay, fine. Thank you.
If you did the, kept it the way you have it, but then put in that the site plan of operation has to be, I mean, because they could still, if you think about, you know, like the storage facilities, you gave them a CUP and now they sell it and the next guy doesn't have a CUP and he's like, well, wait a minute. I can't do anything with this property, but if we keep the CUP but require on transfer that a site plan of operation must be brought to the plan commission, then at least you know who the person is and how they're going to operate. Maybe their hours will be different. Any of the issues that you may have come up with, complaints from residents, at that point you'd be able to bring that up with the new owner. So just an idea.
We have the right to review any CUP at a time also, don't we? So.
Yeah. I like the suggestion too. Maybe it's just a matter of reviewing the operation plan since that, yeah, in my opinion, it makes sense if they run with the land and if you bought property, you reasonably would expect you're buying something that's entitled with a conditional use.
Maybe like a plan of operation, when that ownership changes, they should be coming in.
Right.
Technically,
right.
yeah, that's a change. Yeah.
But I think it just keeps everybody on the same page as far as expectations and everything. Not that the previous owner, let's just say, had operational hours of 9 to 5, and the new owner had no idea, and that new owner's operating from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. It just aligns all the expectations.
Mark?
All good. Thank you.
Did I hear correctly? You guys are saying you could keep it as proposed here? You think you already have sufficient ability to review site plan of operation?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I guess we can go through other land uses. This would be a good time to check. I asked about commercial truck parking as well, but maybe we could just want to do that tick through. Somebody brought up airports, so that currently is still in here, would be listed as a conditional use only in your A10 district. And no other criteria except FAA review.
I just want you to know that if you have something in here that you want to remove, you don't think it's possible. I'm not saying airports, that was my example, because there's not enough money to do that in my other, my past experience. But if you take it out of the CUP and it's nowhere allowed, it's not permitted anywhere, that's when the person that wants to build an airport comes in and asks for a conditional use where they want it. So it's not like it's a no forever. It has to be somebody that wants it that brings it towards you, for you. So I'm not saying to take out airports or anything. I was just using that as an example.
Mhm.
We have a landing field in the town.
Yeah.
In your backyard?
Huh? It's close to me.
No.
I didn't
We
know
used to have two of them. We went over Pewaukee Road too.
Yep.
With that
Hmm.
in town.
Hmm.
In
one.
town.
Pewaukee is actually land that's going into Sussex now, it's PGA property, but it's right by the pond there, 164, Schmidt Farm.
Yeah.
Schmidt property on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Rachel.
Oh, no problem. Animal hospitals, I don't have the red lines here. Maybe I could pull that up. Let me just show you what would be better to show, because the changes, I wasn't trying to change the uses that were listed, but you could see we did in some cases, more hefty kind of deletions. Most of that's just language that I consider redundant. But animal hospitals, something that Michael and I are trying to do here is not get into when you're trying to read the conditional use section and just get to brass tacks about a conditional use and what is needed to approve it. There's a lot of language about where it's permitted as a use, not conditional, or where it's prohibited. And to me, that belongs in the zoning districts, specifics, not so much in section 4, which is really should just get focused on when it's a conditional use, what happens then. So we're trying to just eliminate that other language that can make it pretty confusing to try to read through. And that's again where a table could help, because a table could really just show you that in one place. If you want to compare where it would be allowed, you know, or prohibited. So didn't try to change it here, just I went back and double checked all the different zoning districts in section 6. Hopefully this is consistent. I certainly will be doing another review of that to make sure we didn't inadvertently strike something. But didn't try to change the nature of what's allowed here as far as animal hospitals, clinics, and so on. The BP zoning district, that was one that you recently amended in 2020. So I just took a look at that. We put language here that you know, just matches what you've already approved. So what happened there? We've got very specific antique shops, gift shops, arts and crafts, things of that nature. So there we just kind of cut things out and just saying it's conditional use in these zoning districts. Because this language was about compatibility, that's already handled up above in the general criteria for any conditional use. So you'll see that kind of language struck from a lot of these use lists here. Gas station, same thing. So no substantive changes, just extra wording. Bed and breakfast, same thing there.
I haven't been here. Why are we, I'm not an antique person, but why do we restrict antique shops and arts and crafts studios, the use of buildings to paint in or gift shops? Why are we restricting them to, I mean, it can be allowable in specific districts, but why do they need conditional uses? What would be the possible hazard of the neighboring
This
property?
predates anybody that's presently here tonight.
Okay.
No idea.
I'm just, it's just an odd requirement that you have to get a conditional use to have a art studio or a gift shop.
I think I'm speculating here, but unless anybody knows for sure, my guess is it's because of the zoning districts. I had the same reaction when I was first thinking about that. And then I went, well, this is listing certain residential districts that normally have smaller lot sizes and are really just residential in nature. So my guess is that's if someone has a house and they want to work in a shop into that, it might be out of place versus if you had a different kind of zoning district, it would be a no-brainer.
Right, so if you're in the BP district versus an R1 or something.
And I presume it's permitted in the BP and everything.
It's
Yeah.
conditional use in one district, but it's permitted in another.
Yeah. I forget offhand which one it's permitted, but there are some other, you know, business districts that would allow that.
That makes more sense.
That makes sense.
That's good. That's exactly the kind of questions I want to hear. Business park, we didn't strike that. I think that's still in here. So and I apologize for the formatting. I could not get the spacing to work out before getting this into packets. It's a lot of wasted paper, but here we are. And so we kept this, just cutting redundant language. A lot of these, you already have the ability to, you know, up your requirements for landscaping, lighting, you know, tweak those as part of reviewing any conditional use. So again, under the general criteria, that's already covered in my opinion. So suggesting here that, you know, they have to have adequate parking. In theory, that's already covered as well. But since this is, parking's probably the biggest impact, it's unique to this type of use. So I thought that was worth keeping here. Cemeteries, mausoleums. So again, this is another one where town board comes into play, where most other conditional uses can just go to plan commission. That's a unique kind of use. So I don't know if you want to keep that at town board or if there's any concern with that. We don't get that proposed very much, I imagine.
I think that's appropriate for the town board.
Sounds like everybody agrees there.
Yep.
Okay, churches and related type uses, those would be, that's plan commission as well. So that's like the others. Commercial truck parking. This is one where I don't know all the background. It just seems like a specific, I don't know all the examples, you know, but there's clearly there were some uses in mind that triggered this kind of code language. When you see a lot of text, there's probably a reason behind it. But this not being familiar, I just thought I'd ask you, do you still think this makes sense? Or you might recall examples where you had to approve this type of thing?
So we have a lot of farm fields, a lot of farmers that can turn things into commercial truck parking in different areas of the town that could very easily be turned into this without this, I believe. So I can't give it a specific example at the moment, but I do remember this being talked about back in 2009 and 10. And I think it's, if I remember correctly, that there's extensive talk about this. Jane would be able to elaborate a little bit more, but Ed, you were around too then.
I can't comment on the specific reasons for the argument pro or con.
Sure.
Are we talking, because we usually hear, questions of backup noise and et cetera, is that?
Well, you could, if you got a 10-acre parcel
Mm-hmm.
that's fits certain criteria, you could turn it into commercial truck parking.
If there's
Even
a
though,
sub,
because farm fields they go in and out of R1, R2, I mean,
yes,
obviously it's a farm field, but there's certain criteria to turn those into commercial truck lots.
and if there's a subdivision nearby, guess what?
Home subdivision, residential.
Yeah, instant anger.
The spot zoning requirement doesn't apply to farm fields.
Okay.
They just go wherever they want, and I think that's part of the reason why some of this was in there.
All right, so otherwise then you'll just see the changes are very minor, kind of, extra language type stuff, again, redundant text. So we'll keep that as is. There's a limit on storage of 3 vehicles. As long as that still makes sense, we're not proposing any changes there. We get to contractors' yards. They're also just taking out language that would be kind of repetitive. Otherwise, no changes to what the criteria would be. Same with fur farms, pig farms, things of that nature. In-law unit. That's any residential. That's a range of zoning districts, so that's still intact. Updated references here to the proper codes. I think Michael handles that one.
In-law.
Land altering activities, we already talked about that one. Limited family businesses, service-oriented businesses. So this, I think, is something that could come up more often. I think here the strikeouts were, yeah, so you still see we still have some language in here that we didn't strike. So where the use is not permitted, it just takes some time to kind of puzzle through this, and I didn't want to inadvertently delete something that should be there. So that's why that was not cleaned up more.
As it relates to each of these uses, the goal will be at the end of the day that it will state contractor's yard, the following requirements shall be met. Boom, 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 as opposed to in this district, but not this district, permitted here, not permitted there. That'll be all fleshed out down below in the remaining part of the ordinance. So that's where we're headed. But as Rachel alluded to, didn't want to inadvertently delete something as well.
Yep. So we're getting through it here. Sorry for the red lines are a little big. Marinas and boat liveries. Is that something that even exists in Lisbon? I'm just not sure. So I wanted to check if that's
Well, we do have a little bit of Lake 5 that it goes into Lisbon, but we also have big holes that are going to fill up with either garbage or water, hopefully water. So this could be an issue. Well, not an issue now. It could be an issue probably not in our lifetimes, but
You have the bait shop?
yeah, right off Lake 5.
Yeah.
So there is one area where it does apply, and I think there'll be more in the future.
okay. Great. Just want to check on that. There's a beefy little section. Mobile homes, no big change there.
Lannon's got it, so we gotta have it.
I didn't check Lannon's. I guess I should be, huh?
Oh, yeah.
We got motels and hotels, multiple family. We just added the definition here. I think it was kind of, I don't know if it was implied or stated somewhere else in the code, so we just wanted to clarify it's right, you know, that's what we mean by that. In a building containing more than 2 dwelling units, I think that's pretty typical. Now you see PUD stuff was all removed. We have private clubs and resorts. In any district except your, you know, handful here. I thought those still made sense. Disposal of non-combustible materials. It's kind of waste processing. Nothing but minor cleanup there. Public and semi-public buildings. I know I had one question here. This does double the offset requirements of the zoning district that it's in. That's the only land use I saw that really said you need to have double offsets. If you're proposing a public or semi-public building, to me, that just seemed a little odd and sort of, I don't know the reason for that kind of requirement. I could imagine a building that's public and, you know, proposed with normal setbacks and offsets that might be fine, but hard to say.
Yeah, I don't know why that would have been in there.
Yeah, that is weird.
Want that in there or removed? I don't know why it was in there.
If there's no justification for it, I prefer it gets removed.
Mark?
Yeah, I'd say take it out if we don't understand why we even have it.
Yeah, I think there's a specific proposal for something like that. You could probably up the setbacks if you felt like there was some reason, right?
Yeah. Site of safety concern. If you need, yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Quarrying. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the slides for a moment here. We did not try to get into changing the quarry standards, but definitely want to check. Oh, we'll have to go back to contractors' yards. I apologize, but I had more questions on here than I remembered. Got into the weeds here. Okay, so quarries. It's about requirements for existing quarries. This to me read like they were just creating our first zoning code or our new zoning code. And so there's existing quarries in town and they have to submit certain things. So there's procedures for application, which seem normal. This is just a question where I don't know the basis behind this and if it's still relevant or if it was more specific to, there's language about renewals. Let me see if I can find this here. I apologize. It's taking a minute. Okay, restorative, that all makes sense. Okay, the other section, renewal permits for existing operation. Oh, we covered renewals up in a different section, so we kind of consolidated that. Now, where am I looking? I'm sorry. I'm gonna scroll down and find that here. Okay, we got process for applying, all that made sense. General requirements. Yeah, so here renewal existing operations. I don't know, Michael, do you remember what we were getting at here? Or H25 down? Well, it used to say application permits or applications for existing operations. So saying if you have an existing operation, you have to submit an application. And I think we just kind of put that into more of a renewal. So say within 3 years of this ordinance, yeah, any existing operation is required to make an application for a renewal permit. It just reads a little odd. I'm trying to figure out why it would, might not be a big deal. Maybe we just leave it in, but.
Yeah, I think when I remember our conversation, Rachel, is that we kind of left it at there is history with quarries in the town and didn't want to. It was obvious by the amount of detail that there is for quarry operations in the town's code that there's clearly an intent and purpose and wanted an absolute clarity. So we didn't want to change too much, but it seemed like, from what I recall, Rachel, in our conversation, that just like any other CUP, it's subject to review at any point in time. So does the Plan Commission want, for specifically quarries, to have them come back in every 3 years to renew their CUP when, that's not, standard for what other provisions are? That was, I think, why we kind of flagged it and cleaned it up here. Yeah, well, you'll see in the, the renewal section that we cleaned up a lot of it, the language, but we still left the whole component of renewal within 3 years. That way, I think, Rachel, that was the question, was, do we want to continue with that same plan for quarry operations? I don't know if there's a particular purpose for that. But
Yeah, because it says within 3 years after the original adoption of this ordinance, it seemed very specific, like a time that would have already passed. And so why would it still be in the code versus an ongoing requirement for renewals? Which I don't know if you want to require that, but that would seem to be a different question.
They're not going anywhere.
Have we,
that's kind of what I thought.
we-
Review them annually. I mean,
we have site inspections,
Yeah.
but I mean, they're governed by the state, by the DNR. Why do we need to ask that for every, the question is, if we are asking for every 3 years, they have to reapply, correct?
No, within 3 years after the original adoption of this ordinance. So this ordinance has been around more than 3 years, so we should be able to remove that portion.
Well,
Or we'd have to change the words to take out after the ordinance was adopted.
Yes,
You want me to take another look at that?
I swear I recall too that this one had some sort of recurring review that was different than the others.
Well, you said that if they're being reviewed, site inspections every year.
Yeah, it's up in a different section here.
I mean, it seems in just reading this paragraph, it probably could be cut.
Yeah, it seemed like you've already got renewals. That to me is logical, but this one was an odd kind of.
Yeah, I think we're ready to get us here.
Okay, let's hit, there's a couple other questions I wanted to get here. Contractors yards, if we go back to that for a second, it requires a planting screen. Ed, you're gonna like this one. At least 10 feet tall in initial height. I just didn't know if is that reasonable for someone to, put in their initial plantings at 10 feet tall, or is your intent to make sure that when it's all said and done, they have 10 feet tall, so give them time to grow? Maybe 6 feet tall at initial height might be more reasonable. I'm just kind of offering a suggestion, but I guess you know the background better than me. So do you think that's reasonable for all your contractors' yards? Kind of a detail, but the cost of the plantings, I could imagine, would.
Yeah, those are awful tall trees. Those are awful tall to bring. How do they live after they've been scooped up and moved into trees?
Can you buy them that tall? I mean, I'm kind of.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Um,
Sure, you can buy, evergreens, which would create a better wall than a deciduous tree,
Well, I
easily
think
over 10 feet.
the way they got around it was they put berms so many feet high
And then they
Yeah.
planted,
That's true.
they
Yeah,
planted
it
a
wasn't like
tree.
the tree was 10 feet tall, it was that you had a 3-foot berm and then you put a
Tree on it.
tree on top.
And I do think you have a lot of, again, you have discretion when you're reviewing to require more plantings, more screening for any conditional use. So I think by being so specific with this one, it means like, I don't know if you have that wiggle room. I mean, maybe you do, and I'm just overthinking it, but it strikes me as, wow, the town really wants 10 feet tall right off the bat. Like that's a requirement, just a more.
Well, it is, Rachel, a pertinent question because berming on subdivisions has obviously become very popular in the last 10 years, and the Cadillac of Birmingham subdivision has to be barnwood, which is okay.
These are the contractors.
I'm sorry. Contractors' yards. Well,
So it's a requirement they use. 10
Move
foot
on,
trees to
Ed.
Shield the contractor yard,
Yeah.
but it's crazy. That's all trees.
yeah.
We could cut that in half.
Brian, do we have a specific example you could give for Ed Nelson before he falls out of his chair of a contractor's yard in this area? You know,
Um,
Oh, we got the stone,
Pain and Dawn. Do they have one?
I think so. And then you got the, right over the railroad tracks on 164.
okay, and that,
Oh, yeah,
that
yeah.
operation on the
The rock,
right-hand
the
side.
The
The
rock.
rock,
That's
yeah,
it.
that's
Right,
right.
and that's in the town. I thought that was in Sussex.
Oh, no, don't give it
No,
away.
it's in the
No.
town.
I won't, I don't want to give away any more territory.
Mm-mm.
Okay,
And we have contractor, like Stark was a contractor's yard.
mhm.
Construction resources.
There's one off of Good Hope Road, Brooks. He had that long driveway and we made him put up that screening along the driveway for the neighbor next door. I can't remember her name.
Okay. Well, the
He's
objective
farther
is,
in the back, but
the objective is to hide what might be considered objectionable or like who wants.
yeah.
And if I lived in a home, I wouldn't want to stare out the window and see a lot of construction equipment, for example. All right,
Then a 10-foot high fence, I guess, right?
yeah. I'd actually rather have evergreens than a 10-foot fence.
I mean, initial
Yeah,
height
there
of
you
trees
go.
of 10
Yeah.
foot though.
Yeah.
It's kind of
You
crazy.
cut
Yeah.
that in half,
No,
in my opinion.
I mean, even 6 foot, I think, is
What she's
reasonable.
suggesting is, propose requiring a 10-foot tall at mature height
Yeah,
or 6-foot tall at initial height.
I think 6 foot initial height is reasonable.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
when a species
Well,
is grown to
that
10
gives you at
feet
least
tall,
something decent to start with.
Sorry.
Yes.
No? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It's
This
not gonna,
isn't like a normal, I mean, this is a contractor's yard, so I mean, I guess I would consider it 6 foot. You're gonna put a little bit more of a requirement. 10 foot's crazy, but
yeah. Well, the irony is the taller the tree, the longer it's gonna take it to get applicated to its location and hence grow. And you stand a better chance of losing it as opposed to a smaller planting. Smaller plantings will grow faster.
I've heard that.
you need to go talk to the plantings at my Sussex store and tell them.
Now I do, Rachel, I do know something about something, but otherwise I'm lost.
I just thought you'd like talking about trees, Ed. I know it's your jam.
Yeah, thank you.
We could change it to Ed's ordinance or something like
Yeah.
that. Ed
Put my name
section.
on it.
So we all, 6 foot okay is acceptable?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
10 feet mature height or not even go there, just say 6 feet initial height.
I think 6 foot initial.
Yeah, 6 foot initial.
Okay, thanks. Just want to make sure I'm hearing you right. Okay. Oh, the thing about marinas and boat liveries prohibiting arcades. I know there's a connection with potentially adult uses there, which is a different ball of wax, but I just thought that sounded very specific. Like it would, if it's actually just a game, maybe it's, yeah, I guess related to tavern. What's that?
Sarah, there's still arcades even out there?
Yeah, both
Other than,
They're
well,
video machines.
Dave and Buster's.
Yeah, they're coming back now. It's so old, they're new again.
Yeah.
Chuck E. Cheese.
Marinas and boat libraries. Arcade.
I could just see where it could be fun to have games at some like tavern near the lake or something. I don't know if that, situation would ever come to pass, but
We want to keep that in there, get rid of it. I mean, I don't see why it's even there. I don't know why that ever was there.
Why is it there?
They don't care if they
There, I've
arcade at the library.
So there are bars out there that seem to be, I've seen in Milwaukee especially pop up that use the arcade component in beer, and that seems to be
The
interesting.
arcade.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Get all of
but it's still, it's a bar, bottom line. I mean, yeah.
We might have a landscaper that wants to add arcade. I don't know.
coming next.
Ditching that would be fine. Everybody
Yeah, that's fine.
ditch
I'm
it.
fine with. yeah,
Mark?
I'm fine with it.
But yeah, since nobody seems to have any idea why we even have it, I think it should probably come out.
Out the door. That one's gone.
All right. Okay, we talked about quarries, I think. We have made it to the end of Rachel's questions. Congratulations.
Yes.
If you're still awake, you are a champ. Okay, just gonna go through, okay, I mentioned communication towers, so that section, Michael wants to take another look at that, just make sure it's on the up and up as far as state law.
Yeah, let's make sure that one's cut and clear, because I don't, people putting up communication towers seem to win a lot of lawsuits.
Mhm.
Even the
Yeah, that would be one where referencing statutes might be more important than the usual.
Right.
Yeah,
I
point.
100% mark on that.
And that's likely to
I
come
mean,
up again.
we're in an
Oh,
area where
yes.
this is gonna come up more and more.
Yeah.
Let's not get ourselves in the middle of a lawsuit or something.
No, and that includes like towers for communication for police and fire.
It's towers and communication.
Towers.
in general. I mean, you're gonna see this, we're gonna see this is in the future, these Wi-Fi towers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're gonna go to these smaller towers, but they're gonna be more of them. And these people know their rights.
Yeah.
They know it.
I'm sure there's more room for towers in Community Park.
Yeah, I mean,
I've seen
And
a community where the attorney was giving a presentation on 5G and kind of what that means, what that's going to look like, helping the community prepare and make sure the ordinances reflect that. Just from my standpoint, I would recommend making sure that that's included, whatever, you know, wherever that technology is going, to set you up so your code would speak to that.
And I think that's to Mark's point of just referencing the code instead of so much spelling out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're bound by those statutes anyway. It would be nice to have that in front of people when they start looking it up and see that the town can't change it even if we wanted to.
mhm,
Yeah.
oh, yeah.
Yes.
which is wrong, but no comment.
You'll see that coming soon. Or storage display. Truck terminals, self-storage mini warehouses. One thing I want to get to, so truck washes, we didn't make substantial changes, anything to self-storage facilities, but truck washes, I'm curious which districts you think those would be suitable in. You've had one proposal for, it would be for a site zone B4, but it could certainly come up in other places. It sounds like there's a lot of demand. You obviously have a lot of, you know, big truck users in the area. Be a lot of demand for a truck wash is what I've heard. And it could be a, you know, very good use for commercial sites, and that, albeit not necessarily a pretty one, but you have the ability to kind of dress them up as a conditional use. So this is just the first crack at some language related to that. Did look at another code, and I'm forgetting the community right now. Menominee Falls, some other place in the area had some language around truck uses, so I've been looking for some examples on that.
So there's, you have no requirement in there that needs to be on sewer and water or well and septic.
They have the one that actually has been proposed would be on, well, and septic, a holding tank actually.
Okay.
Which I see being very costly, but
Yeah. Is that near Quarry Corners? by any
that's
chance?
right, that is where it corners,
Are we talking about a high capacity well if it's a truck wash?
whatever the requirements gonna be.
So here it's, you can see it's not very robust, but just thinking like at a minimum, you want it on a major street. Obviously, you don't want your trucks going down some local road to use a thing like this.
No.
I don't know if this is sufficient or not, but at least having, you know, some kind of waste disposal recycling plan. What are they going to do with all their refuse?
Sure.
Certainly screening comes into play there. So far, I'm not actually up to speed on what the requirements might be for wastewater treatment, water quality. I think that would be more your engineer purview, but if, you can always, you know, talk with Mitch in the meantime too, and just see if this seems, I don't think he's had a chance to really look through this, but if this seems sufficient, you know, maybe that works, but
Yeah. I just don't want to duplicate what the county's going to put them through as well, because they get the final say, I think, on the wastewater. Unless I'm mistaken about that, the county has to review these uses for wastewater and actually the well as well. Then that well issue came up with the gas station a couple of years ago, where is it a high capacity well they want to use, or is it a standard residential sized well? Or I don't know how in depth we need to get with this, because I don't want to redo and pay to review stuff that another government agency is already doing anyway. You know, if the county requires these things to be done, our ordinance should have some verbiage that the required county permitting is done, or whatever the right language is to say that, you know, the county has to do their review and permit it.
We do have in our standard regulations compliance with, you know, state, federal, and local. That could fall under that provision, Mark.
Yeah.
Now,
And
just,
we reference back to section 3F. Is that what you're talking about, Michael?
yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, it's already, this is other existing language in your code. Yeah, it references NR 102 administrative code. So we kind of just reference back to that, not trying to get too cute with, you know, the specifics under the conditional use section.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to reference, you know, that section in the conditional use or whatever, you know, so that again, we have the standard in one place and we don't have to amend 14 ordinances if we decide to change something, that might be appropriate. But even going a step farther, if it's the county's environmental health section that actually permits the well and permits, you know, the wastewater treatment plan, you know, whether they're going to be able to use a holding tank or they're going to use a septic field or whatever, if that's their job, then I don't really want to pay someone to re-review that.
How about if we review what the county reviews to see what they are gonna look at
Yeah.
and not be redundant in our.
Yeah, Chris review.
Yep.
Great. And how about the zoning districts? Do you feel like these are the best ones for allowing it? Do you think any others warrant it? Kind of just threw quarrying in here, M1, M2, B3, and B4, thinking that it might be suitable. I think B3 is so broad that would probably.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, it would have to be an industrial sector. It would be a non-starter to put it in an area of major subdivisions in the town.
And that gets at that point of, you know, if it's listed as conditional use in that district, or, you know, then if it's zone B3, that tells someone, hey, I could put a truck wash there. As long as I meet the criteria for conditional use, I'm good to go. You can always take another look at the zoning map. I'd probably want to do that before the next meeting and kind of run through. Does it make sense, you know, when you look at your zoning map, or if you guys want to do that? But it sounds like that probably works. I guess any other guidance for us or questions on the conditional uses?
We can do a motion to approve right now and be completely done with this. If you'd like.
Move to approve. No,
I'm kidding.
yes, I knew. Yeah. Fundamentally, very important, very legalistic, which of course I'm not the best at, but a lot of hours and time went into this. And it's so important because down the road, as we get further and further being unrural, which we are getting very quickly, we're going to, so that people get along as our subdivisions encroach on what space we have left, it's very important that we have a blueprint and a map. And that people that come to us, as Mark has very efficiently pointed out, thank you, Mark.
You mean repeated?
Blueprint. We need a good blueprint. So, but Rachel, thank you. Michael, thank you. Kathy, I'm sure.
All right. Any other comments?
No.
No, great job. Thanks.
Absolutely. And I just point out here, county, we did not send this to county staff yet, but we typically do that with all of your ordinance changes because of they're bound to come up with comments and we want to make sure that we get those before you act on it and before town board acts, just so we can, if we miss something and we don't want to have to rerun it through that process. So I'd love to do it just once and be done if we can. That'd be the brass ring here. So I'll just work with Kathy and Michael on that and we'll run it through the procedure, I guess, and you'll see it again soon. I don't know if we'll get comments back from them in time for January, but we'll try.
Is there a motion to postpone until the next, or motion to table, excuse me, to the next meeting?
So move.
Mark moved it. You seconded it?
I'll second.
I'll second. All right. Motion made and seconded. No discussion on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Right. Item E, overview and approval of timeline and recommendations to town board approval of public participation plan for a 10-year update to the Lisbon Comprehensive Development.
All right, this one, I didn't know if this come as a surprise to any commissioners. We haven't really talked about it recently, or the comp plan update is obviously, can sound like a big thing, but the goal with getting this in front of you here is just simply that your plan was approved back in 2009. It's now over 10 years old. And so state law, I think, as you all are aware, it requires that comp plans be updated at least every 10 years. So the goal here would be to just go through this process. Right now, we're doing some other housekeeping for Lisbon. We want to, as you're getting more urban, as pointed out, you've got other kind of goals. You've been working on your intergovernmental matters. We want to make sure that your comprehensive plan reflects that and reflects your goals and where you're at and how you've developed since 2009. So what's proposed here is not, the town has not budgeted for a significant comprehensive plan update. So going through and actually, it's a very big document. It's got, mostly county, it's largely a county comprehensive plan, as I think you're aware, but then it's got some exhibits that were added to add enough local level detail that it could be Lisbon's comprehensive plan as well. So it was created with all these different municipalities involved. It contains a lot of countywide data sets, things that to actually update those or recreate that would be a very significant effort. And so what we're proposing here, we know that the bare minimum requirement would be that you could actually, if Lisbon wanted, you could decide that your current plan works for you still and just simply re-adopt it, put a new date on it, a new cover, go through the appropriate public process and say that you're fine with it as is. But I have identified a few places where I think it warrants an update to some of those exhibits, just to reflect, like I said, where you're at now with new agreements and your goals in the long run. So the basic statutory process is that you need a public participation plan that gets approved. So that would be something the Plan Commission would have to actually approve before you would go through an update, and town board would have to approve it. There's a public hearing, which you, as I think you do joint hearings with Plan Commission and board. It requires a 30-day notice. So we've drafted up a schedule, a tentative one that's in your packets, just something that might show how it could play out and allow enough time for the public to review this. There's distribution after the fact, of course. The statute really spells out what those requirements are for a comprehensive plan update. But what I'm looking for tonight is really to get this schedule in front of you, see what you think about it. Would that make sense to do in the next couple of months? And we included in your packets a draft public participation plan that would be sufficient to, meet the statutory requirement. And it involves, presenting a draft, making that available to the public. I guess I don't know how you prefer to kind of look at that, but I'd be happy to kind of walk through the schedule and how staff sees this possibly playing out. If you have comments or questions on any of this, just want to bring that to your attention tonight.
We're out of compliance right now.
We want to take care of it in 10 years.
Oh, yeah, especially for incorporation.
Yeah,
So
when
we
we
have
have
a few things that we want to tweak in the text. part
Is this
of it.
enough time to get that done?
And we did talk to the county. The county's asking for application by the 15th we have it to the Plan Commission by the 14th. Although it won't go through the whole process yet, we can put an application in to the county, make the application so we can make the deadline for the 15th with them understanding that it hasn't gone. So it's been done before where to get in the application in, by the time they get to us, we'll have already gone through the process. We can pull the application at any time if it's not ready to go, but they only do their major changes once a year, and then they have like fast track amendments. But I think it's important for us to make at least a small attempt to get in compliance, make a few changes that are required, and we can, if we want to, if the board and the commission wants to go into more depth, we can do that after
Submit
the
on the
next year.
14th.
Okay.
There's a good reason why we want to make some changes.
Any state reviews, they're looking to see if you have a comprehensive plan that is up to date.
And so our first step is to pass this participation plan.
Questions, Brian? Ed?
No.
Becky?
No.
Mark?
No.
Anybody wish to make a motion on this?
I think, do we have just to clarify for Kathy, public hearing will be held at town board. I think this should specify if it's a joint hearing with Plan Commission. Just want to make sure this reflects your local process.
You did invite the Plan Commission last time.
Mhm.
That was your process. We weren't sure if you wanted to do a joint one with town board, so you had the public hearing done. So if you do a joint, then the public both parties get to hear the public at the same time.
Right.
So that would be my suggestion.
That's how we did it last time, too.
So we're gonna be joint.
Everybody good with that? Okay. Mark?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on it then? I'll make the motion then that we approve the timeline and recommendation of town board approval of the participation plan for the 10-year update to the Lisbon Comprehensive Development Plan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Nelson. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Item 7 is planner report.
Planner report. Some of these things have been on your planner reports recently. I didn't get this in the packet in time, I'm sorry, but we did have some data on the 24-hour convenience stores and police reports. I know that had been an issue at one point. You were curious if there had been problems with criminal activity or related. I can bring that as a staff report in January if that's all right, just so you have all the data that we did get from area police. I mentioned earlier we're updating town application forms and checklists. Appreciate Kathy pushing on that. Good housekeeping. We had a Mary's Custom Storage, Jeff Fillinger application. He has pulled that for the time being. I know we've talked about that as a forthcoming. For now, it's on hold. Mike Carrick has 2 subdivisions, residential subdivisions in the works. So you're going to see that in January. He's got 2 different locations, a comprehensive plan map amendment proposed and a rezoning. So those will be coming soon. We're just working on reviewing those. He's had 2 pre-application meetings with staff and just yesterday, a development review team meeting with county staff. So they went through one of his subdivisions, and then the other one had previously had county review as well. So it's that's where he's at in that process. The Bonk property, this is one that relates to Merton and potential land division. I don't have any new updates on that, but I still have it here as something kind of waiting in the wings. Same with Quick Trip on Highway Q, no news, but I believe they're going to resubmit at some point soon. Quarry Corners Truck Wash, I had heard from the owner that he was planning to resubmit plans at some point, so I'm just kind of waiting on that one. Israel Taylor, that was a major grading conditional use, was going to come in, that he said is being pulled. So that's now in Brian's hands. And had a couple other planner appointments today. 3 different people I spoke with. Land & Stone, they are proposing, this is an interesting one I'm gonna have to think about a little more, but a sort of a fence wall segment barrier just for privacy on one piece of their site along Highway K, Lisbon Road. So that's something that I think will be a site plan of operation amendment, but it's all county shoreland zoning, so they'll have to go to county and confirm with them what their requirements would be. Smallish project, but just something to be aware of. Another landowner, Steinmetz, proposing a potential CSM. This is probably far off at this point, if ever, but it's, possibly it's under consideration for probably a handful of lots. I think it would be a CSM, and I'll be working with Mitch on that to get that in his hands if it comes in. John Then, proposing a site plan of operation amendment for outdoor storage of vehicles. I believe he came to you a few months ago. I didn't check the minutes yet, but it was it's very much related to that. And I think Brian has more background, but I just learned today what he's kind of looking to do, and want to be able to follow up with him to get an application. I think he's got to come in front of you guys to get his plans amended. So those are all the updates that I have.
So the Tim Bum, I'll just give you a little bit of that. The property is on Lake 5, and it's mostly wetland. And then it also is adjacent to a subdivision in cul-de-sac, which is in Merton. And so Merton wanted to see if they could get their access through Lake 5 instead of through the cul-de-sac. And I did get something from Gong that said that the county is telling them they can't use the Lake 5 access. So he's got to, in order to use or divide the property, even if it was just 3 properties, he'd have to go through the subdivision. So that's what Merton was waiting on to allow them to get the access to it. But I just wanted to give you a
Okay. One thing I just want to follow back, if this is part of item D, if when going through this for the conditional use in the zoning code, if we can put together a standard thing for future chairman, and that they can go through like a checklist for these conditional uses. I have some experience in it, so I know a little bit, but whoever replaces me may not. And I mean, we've seen in other communities, when you get an experienced people sitting in the center chair, they don't, it's no fault of their own. They just haven't done it yet. And this is so important that if we can get some kind of checklist for them to go through, maybe even, this could be even expanded to other things with the plan. The plan commission is the toughest part of this. I mean, people don't realize. And this by far is way tougher than the board, no doubt about it. But something we can maybe get together on that and just give them a checklist to follow, so the next guy sitting here can. As it.
Not gonna be me.
Next guy won't be me either. We got that in common.
Recommendations.
All right.
No. Very good.
Smooth item 8, adjournment.
So move.
There's a second.
I'll second.
Moved by Ed, second by Chad. No discussion on this one.
Mhm.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hey,
Opposed? We're out at 9:34. Pretty solid on that either.
Hey, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everybody.
yes,
Hey,
same to you,
Mark.
Mark. And Rachel.
Everybody.